Hello, Ryan, how are you?
Good, how are you, Ben?
It's a big night tonight, huh? Nice and cool in here as usual.
I didn't bring it with me, Ben.
Well, I don't have the statement, so I'll just ad lib. We are live and in person this evening from Slade Building, Hubbardston. It's being recorded and on film. Thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. I'll call the planning board meeting to order at 6:33. And welcome in attendance, Selectman Stouter, Selectman Galante, Selectman Gerard, and interim town administrator Siegel. Thanks for coming by. We're coming together this evening to review and discuss the information that we received relative to, I guess it would be the importation of soils. I guess that's the best heading I can give it. And I'm gonna turn the floor over to Tom Brackett, who's going to review the emails that he's been so diligently reading, and we'll go from there.
So if I start mumbling, just give me a kick.
Rejoice.
You're certainly welcome to join the table.
Yeah, why don't you guys
We're
come
not
back?
here in official capacity, so we're not.
Okay.
No, it's not a posted meeting. Right, so we just.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I went through all the information, and enlightening would be a good word. It's interesting and enlightening, okay? This all started September 15th, when, according to Anita's email, I don't know if you guys know what she, to Ben, saying that they were gonna have a meeting about Norman Brown's pit and infilling the pit. Then wrote back to her, and this is in the emails. I'm kinda, if you wanna see every email, I can pull it out and give it to you.
No, can I also add, if you wanna, I'm not, it's your meeting.
Yeah.
But feel free to, I know
Yeah.
personally me, I'm here to collaborate. So if you wanna
Okay.
address anything
that's just-
interpretation wise, feel free.
So we're all here, we've been wanting this meeting for a long time. That's behind us, we're having the meeting.
Sounds good.
And that's what's important, that's hopeful. So anyways, I'm just kinda go through the background to January, which I believe the emails show that all the select board was kinda in on everything until January. Okay, knew what was going on, so then got this email from Anita, and half an hour later, he wrote her back an email saying that he'd be happy to discuss this with Norman at that meeting. And, that, in his opinion, this use was probably not gonna be allowed, but hell, and I've heard Ben say this before, would be willing to listen to it, but he couldn't make that particular meeting. And, the planning board didn't have any more emails about that until sometime in November. Okay, so sometime in November.
Didn't Vin invite Mr. Brown to come before the planning board?
Now you're gonna have to be
Sorry.
specific.
I don't think in that one.
No, I don't think he did in that
Maybe
one.
it was later.
Then the select board had a meeting on October 28th at the pit, in which you were there you were there as well. You weren't there, just a couple of, anyway, some of the selectmen, you were there,
I wasn't
Ryan.
there.
You were there, okay. Several selectmen were there, and they obviously discussed the pit, but who also was there was Norman Brown's whole crew, as well as the DEP guy, that was there.
Two
Can I,
guys.
can I add something to that?
Yeah,
So there was a meeting before here, I actually missed. I came in like the last 2 minutes and said, hi, I'm Dan Galante, chair of the select board, blah, blah, blah. And then we went out to the pit
When
after
we-
that.
okay, that was an indicator, it was just, on there.
Yeah, I think
No,
that was the
it was
scheduled
there.
meeting, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
it was at the scheduled meeting,
Yeah.
and I know they had it for some time in September, you couldn't meet it, but then couldn't make it, but then you had it, okay? So we didn't, the planning board, other members of the planning board didn't know that till sometime in November, so. And then,
Well, the DEP was at that meeting. Paul began, then
Paul
Mark
was there,
Baldwin,
right.
I believe.
I just printed out something, I can't find the freaking thing. So, God, and this is a problem, this file is just so massive, and stuff is so big.
So what do you wanna do, go chronologically?
Kind of chronologically, but I'm just gonna give an overview, so we're not here all night. I mean, I think everyone knows the situation. So, but anyways, sometime after that, Vin didn't know, or another planning board didn't know anything about this, really, that was going on. We kinda knew it was out there, but no one knew anything about it. Sometime in where's my-
January.
January, or December actually, Norman Brown had an email to Anita saying that he met with the planning board. I mean, with the Conservation Commission, and the Conservation Commission answered, it said it was okay, and it was, she passed that information, they had approved it, and there was no issue with it.
Wetlands issue.
No, the project.
Okay.
That's what it said. We went over the project with the Conservation Commission, and the Conservation Commission doesn't have a problem with it. I checked the agenda of the Conservation Commission in their meeting minutes, right here, and Rob said that he was there with their engineer Chad, but Norman couldn't make it, but the Conservation Commission had approved it. But there's no indication in the meeting minutes I checked November, December, January, February, that they ever were there, and they ever did it. What's important about that, besides the fact that he said that, I mean, I have no reason to doubt that he did say it, but the Conservation Commission didn't say anything. But besides the disturbing part of having a meeting like that and not having it recorded, or perhaps not having a meeting, and he's saying it's recorded, Anita used this information and relayed this to the DEP, and they get the impression from later correspondence that they didn't, that hurdle has been lifted about allowing this in, and that wasn't actually true. The Conservation Commission, you don't have to raise it, just,
Should I, have you talked to the commission members?
no, we just found this out. I mean,
Okay.
okay, just
Yeah, just asking.
11:30 Friday night.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so we have to resolve that and ask that question. But further going through these papers, before December, all of a sudden Anita comes up with, she's starting to, or there's notes, handwritten notes that she has with her, and I know you guys know this, with her, on her husband's, Paul's stationery, from the desk of Paul Schleifer. And we looked up his company, and it's a very large 21E removal company that deals in the dirts that Norman Brown is proposing to bring in here. And he deals with these very large projects and very large volumes of dirt.
I think that was his former company. Or is it, are you sure it's existing? Cause I know that
It says from the desk.
I know, but I think that those are old notepads. Anyway, doesn't matter.
Well, it doesn't matter. He must be in that business. I mean, all of a sudden we have all these emails, all these handwritten notes, whether they're, and he's obviously involved in this industry, as you are. Did he write these notes? Was he advised, did you guys hire him to, I don't know, did you hire him to do this, or what?
No.
So now we have all these notes with a third party, whether it was Anita or not Anita.
Isn't it true that his company must have been in business because there were emails with his company's name?
No, they weren't. That was a mistake.
Oh.
That was not true. Just so you know. I'm gonna tell you that. Oh. So here was that meeting with Chad. It was December 13th. There it is. And here's the emails. It's NASDI.
Yeah, he no longer works there. I think it's been, I don't know, 5 years, a few years anyway.
Mm.
I know the company he works for now. Just as,
What company is that?
I think Walsh.
They do the same thing.
Not like that, no. I'm just,
Mm.
we're just
Okay.
collaborating here. I'm just,
Okay, whatever.
okay.
So he's not there, he's with Walsh. Good. I know the owner of Walsh. So that's kind of disturbing. So, when we had this meeting in December, in January, he had this meeting anyways, and we're coming up all this, but in this here, it says that the town, in her handwritten notes, and this one, and there's another one in here too, that she appears to be negotiating with Norman Brown to buy the Hubbardston gravel pit. Are you guys aware of that?
To be honest with you, this is all new to me,
Yeah.
most of it.
Well, we really should say something. Mike and I had a discussion. Mike and I talked last night, so I kind of know a lot of the stuff you don't know. So,
Okay.
at least we're gonna ask you.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, hey, that's what we're here.
So basically, if these are Anita's notes, and in fact her husband wasn't involved, okay, we'll make that assumption. I'm not saying that she wasn't, he wasn't, just wondering. But these notes indicate that she was negotiating with Norman Brown to buy the pit,
Our pit?
our pit, the town of Hubbardston pit. You guys have not heard any of this, so.
Is Thomas, just to, for the rest of the planning board, and as we had talked last night, I do remember a conversation Anita had brought to that, not that anything was being negotiated, but I remember it more in the context of, oh hey, Norman Brown said if this goes through, he'd be interested in buying a town pit, since we can't use a town pit to pull anything out anymore, and give us perpetual free lease to dump our
Street sweepings.
street sweepings into it without any question. So it was a kind of a 5-second, hey, here's
Yeah.
what Norman had mentioned.
But should we sell town pit to Norman Brown to Alta access? To allow
That-
access?
But to us, that was the only,
Yeah, well,
the only
and there's
use.
another note in here, and another email in here from Norman Brown and Rob saying that they're interested in buying the pit, but at this time they don't wanna move forward with it, they don't have the money, or they don't wanna spend the money, or whatever. But it was, from Norman Brown's email, like they were offered it. So, and you guys don't know anything about this.
No, I mean, she could offer it with, I mean,
Well, I'm not saying
Well-
she did, I'm just saying that's.
right, I know, I'm just thinking out
Okay.
loud here as we're talking
Okay.
here.
So
you
just
know,
this all leads up to, you know, and the big question is, why are we getting, and you said this, why are you guys getting all excited? So, this is one of the reasons why, okay? And then we find out in the emails that Rob is telling her that they're negotiating and they're almost close to a deal, and that was on January 12th with, I guess, I could be wrong on the date, that they were negotiating with Marinelli, and they were very, oh, here it is, January 3rd, sorry. We are still in negotiation with the Marinelli family. We feel we are close to reaching an agreement with them on their price. So now this is this project that, oh, by the way, Norman Brown said was going to be 1 million yard, or 1.5 million yards. Anita's notes here showing that it's just the Marinelli pit is 5,996,333 yards.
that's it.
Yeah.
And then there was, I mean, we heard some of this came to us in different fashions, but then there was also Bates.
Bates
property.
pit, and he's negotiating probably, I don't know.
Access.
Steve Boucher's pit.
Stu,
Yeah,
that's
and that
Bates.
was more, I think that was more
It was an
for
access.
access from 68.
Yeah,
Anyway.
but if he went and started filling Marinelli's pit, which is even, is it bigger than this one?
Oh, yeah.
It's significantly bigger.
A lot bigger.
Right, so, and as Mr. Brown, if you were at the hearing the other night, Mr. Brown was saying this town is looking for places to put this stuff, and he
No,
said.
DEP.
The DEP is looking, and as soon as they find a place, they're gonna be trucking the stuff in, big time. So, from what I've gleaned from these records here, is the 1.5 million proposal that he's made to you, and, we'll get to that after.
Because it's not really a proposal yet.
Well, let's,
Meaning us in
okay,
the room.
I'm-
I'm not mixing
we'll get to
words,
that
I'm just
after,
telling
we'll
you.
get to that after.
Yep.
Okay, but the amount of fill he was saying he was gonna do, and you guys are aware, and the amount that he has said to the DEP is 1.5 million yards, but this is much more significant. I feel, and from reading the notes in here, it's much more significant size project as well. And then there's information, emails in here, several of them, about, you wanna see that calculation? About this, that, he's gonna pay the town $1 a yard. So we've done some research in that, in Rutland and the different dirt people, and they actually don't pay this, and you're in the business, you might know this more than I do.
Oh, here you
They,
are.
they don't do it by the yard, they do it by the ton.
Ton, correct.
Right, and it's 26 cents a ton. That's what Rutland was paid, and that, which the dirt doctors we talked to, the dirt distributors rather, that's what they sell it for.
It's supply and demand. But I'm not saying you're wrong,
Right.
but it
But
really
I'm
is.
saying, well, but his email to Anita is very clear. There's one email that says we're gonna be giving, if you do 35 trucks a day, it's 70 cents a, get it here somewhere, it's exact. It's a very specific what he was saying he was gonna do. And it came out to $250,000 a year, based on $1 a yard. it's not really, I think that was an overestimate of what he would be doing.
Can I just add something to sort of the discussion?
Yeah,
So the reason this interim policy is in place for the DEP, and again, I didn't write it, or I've just been through it, like you guys probably have as well, is because the Massachusetts doesn't have any landfill space, and for years and years and years, forget about this RCS one
Yeah.
for a moment, but fully straight up clean, I dug a hole in Wakefield and had to put a shopping center in, but didn't have anywhere to put the dirt, so I brought it to the landfill and filled up landfill space where it really should have landfill stuff. Solid waste from us, agreements, that sort of stuff. So anyway, that's the genesis of the policy is to not have that stuff go to landfills in Massachusetts because we just have a small state and we have not new landfills being created because no one wants to build a new landfill in their town either. So anyway, that was just
is that how they sell it to us? That's how they do it, is by the ton,
correct.
not by the yard.
I can't speak for everybody. I've never seen it by the yard.
No, I can't. I mean, I was in the construction industry. It's impossible. They roll these
You have
things.
to measure the trucks are different sizes. Forget it.
And fill it
Yeah.
up different sizes, so,
They have scales on the side.
yeah. So it's all safe to assume that what he was saying, to me, in reading that email, then doing you did some research, that this dirt weighs 2.2 tons
No, 1.5 to 1.7 tons per yard.
Correct.
per yard. So we're talking, well, how much is that a yard? I mean, how much is that we're gonna be getting? We're not getting $1 a yard, wouldn't be getting $1 a yard, we'd get maybe 35 cents a
No,
yard.
you get $1.50 a ton.
What-
Because if it's 1.5 tons per cubic yard,
Yeah,
if you have 1 cubic yard, it's 1.5.
but that's not the going rate. The going rate is 26 cents.
Okay, I'm not speaking to that. I'm
Yeah,
just
no,
speaking to the conversion.
but I was just saying, if it's 26 cents a ton and there's 1 point something tons for that, and we're not getting $1 a yard, so we're getting 35 or 40 cents a yard. Which, if you're getting 50% less than the proponent of this policy is giving, is saying he's gonna give you, that would obviously influence everyone's city. Would you take a ride with someone,
Wait. I wouldn't take $10 a yard for this stuff.
well, that's irrelevant. No, we're not there
We're
yet,
not- yeah.
okay? We're not there yet, okay? All I'm saying is, he was proposing $1 a yard. In reality, from the research that we've done and from the information we've been able to find from these records, it was actually gonna be less than 50 cents a yard, or 50. And he was saying we're gonna get $250,000 a year. The most we would get maybe $125,000 a year, based on his figures, okay? So, you're, obviously, your decision, whether to allow this dirt, good or bad, okay? And putting up all the traffic and everyone complaining, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
everything else, would be different. You would look at this as a different project.
It would. If I just add one other thing is, again, to Tom's point, let's separate that from a moment, whether
Yeah.
this material would ever even come here.
Yeah.
But we would be in a full-on negotiation. These are numbers that are being tossed around and preliminary, apparently. We would be in a full-on negotiation to be able to have say in what we would, for the greatest benefit of the town. So just as far as using those numbers as the final numbers on a fantasy that we're talking about anyway, let's just be careful about that, because
Okay.
I think it barely matters, supply and demand, access, all that stuff, so.
Okay, anyway, let's
Okay.
moving on
All right.
here, a little bit more, okay. So let's go back to Anita, and we're still November, December. When you guys first approached, Anita put out a press release, and I don't have a date of that press release because it's not on it. But she said in that press release that the Board of Selectmen had been approached by Norman Brown, blah, 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 to put this pit in here. And that perhaps a full facility will go on. She goes, Brown is proposing the site to be approved by DEP, and the Selectmen has received a site, as a right receiver. But she says in here that they have made a proposal to you. And, maybe it's not this one, it's the next one, when she put out to the
neighborhood.
to the neighborhood. She refers to, do you have that one? It refers to a,
Two of them.
it refers to, she has a plan, okay?
He threw a plan down at us at one point.
Well, that was in February,
Okay.
yeah,
We submitted that for approval.
yeah. Okay, we're not going there yet.
Check.
Okay.
Let's not go there yet.
We're still in November, December.
Yeah, so basically, she sent this proposal,
This letter is dated November 18th.
November 18th, oh, it is?
This is for the Board of Selectmen by Anita, Town Administrator, and the text reads identically to the one that went out with the
That's the one.
selectmen, same date, same text, but the town letterhead is on it.
What's it say? Is it that one that says she has a plan?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
They submitted
If
a
you-
plan.
If you, hold it up to the light, there is no textual difference.
Okay, well, we believe you. I'm not gonna fight you.
I used to do that with drawings a lot, it's easy to tell when the change is made.
Okay, the select board invites you to attend the meeting on January 11th to discuss a proposal presented to the board by Norman Brown. And,
I think that was we were gonna be receiving the proposal.
well, she was
Well,
saying they
and
already
that
have a
was-
proposal.
That was the meeting that we wanted, well, we had asked you to do that, because we wanted the abutters that.
Yeah,
this-
Pitcherville
this-
Road
I think it
neighbors.
was shortly before then is when he had a presentation
Right.
store with the drawings, and he has a pit, and this is what he
Right.
wants to do.
Is that when Laura and Mike came?
Yes.
Mm.
No, because we canceled that one because Norman Brown couldn't make it.
Okay.
Right,
Laura and
that
Mike
would
came
get
to a
canceled.
separate meeting.
He canceled that meeting after he talked to the planning board, and he found some opposition to the planning board.
But we wanted the
I remember.
abutters on the street to hear at least what his idea
Right.
first.
Well, I'm sorry, but I went to that meeting.
Oh, yes.
We were having a planning board meeting, and I stepped into the other room, and Mr. Brown was meeting with some of the abutters. No other town party was there, no elected official or anybody was there. He was having a private meeting with, some abutters. And I don't know who they were, I didn't see sign-in sheets, I didn't see anything.
And that was a meeting that we wouldn't have known about, nor did we call.
Right, and that was after that one was canceled.
Right.
This one was set up first and canceled, and then he had another meeting, and there wasn't many people there, but
Well,
Yeah.
your letter says, the board also expects that Mr. Brown will also be reaching out to Pitcherville Road residents directly to offer opportunities to discuss the project with you. That's what he did, directly, he didn't,
Uh,
it wasn't a posted town meeting or something.
So, it wasn't a meeting, and he has every right to ask the people to come to a meeting whenever he wants. I mean, he was
That's
just
fine.
using the building, town allowed him to use the building, obviously, so
Okay.
it's not a big deal. So where was I?
Christmas.
Well,
The city of Gardner, yeah, the city of Gardner received that, and I talked to the conservation agent there. And he was planning on coming to that meeting because they're very, very concerned about it. And we'll jump to that conservation commission meeting, only because we're there with it. And we talked to the conservation commission there, and their agent, and actually Tom and I met with the mayor last week.
This is Gardner's concept.
Gardner's Conservation
Alright.
Commission, and they were very concerned about this, and they sent a letter to DEP and to the town. And they never received an answer from either the town or or the DEP. And they had that meeting was canceled, so we've seen, they were under the impression that nothing was happening. But there was a lot happening, there was a ton of stuff happening. And I don't think from my discussions with Mike, you guys knew a lot of stuff that was going on. Do we need a drink or something? So I mean, a lot of this stuff is going
I do.
on. Okay, and the Gardner Conservation Commission is very, very concerned about this, because of the location of that, and we'll get to that after, I just wanted to kinda throw that out there.
and just as an aside here, in Anita's notes, she has a, did you put the yellow or did she?
I did it.
Okay, it says Zone 2, which is the wellhead protection zone for Gardner that they're concerned about. DEP says there's no issues per Paul at DEP. So she discussed the zone wellhead protection issue with DEP.
That came up I remember Bill Murray was present during one of the meetings talking about zones. Again, I don't have the
Yeah,
specifics.
I have that email, there's an email in there about that.
Okay.
And Bill Murray said it's a problem in the Zone 2 protection area.
I remember him saying,
Yeah.
I do remember him
Yeah,
saying that and
yeah.
saying, no, and there's being some discussion about it and him saying, you sure?
Yeah,
And,
there's a real problem with
Actually, I
it.
do remember that. I remember him saying something about he's really surprised that
Yeah.
DEP would even consider this in the zone two. I do remember that.
Yeah, so, and believe me, when, I'll just tell you a quick story how I got in contact with the Conservation Commission. I'm a member of North County Land Trust, they had a canoeing outing, happens to be in the Snake River Swamp, so I'm surrounded by the
Where's the Snake River?
The Snakes where the swamp is basically the 100 feet from where this shit is gonna go. Oops, I swear. feet from where the stuff is gonna go, and I'm sitting in a canoe next to the Conservation Commission, I go, hey, that's where they're gonna put the 1.5 million yards of SR2 and SR1 soils. He goes, no, they're not. They can't put that there. I go, we're in a canoe. He goes, no. So I mean, and then we got talking, and then I sent him a lot of information, and he sent me a lot of information about this whole
And
thing.
he was at the hearing the other night too.
He was the guy at the hearing the other night.
That was him.
And they're very, I can't tell you how important this is to the city of Gardner's water supply. I mean, I'm pretty sure they're upset about it, but the potential liability for the town of Hubbardston of polluting their water supply. And let me give you a little more background about the site. The old Harrington Richards Gun Factory, which is on the other side of that Snake River well, and they have a real big pollution problem on the other side there, okay? Which could, and they're monitoring it a lot, because they could have some contaminants get into their well and they're screwed. So if Hubbardston allows 1.5 million yards or 6 million yards or whatever onto this place on, you've got the Miller's River, headwaters of Miller's River is on this side, Hubbardston Brook on this side, which goes, both feed into a big swamp, which feeds into the Miller's River and into the well head, okay? Okay, so now you have 3 sides of this thing that could get contaminated. So my big worry for the town of Hubbardston is, and I've said this at many meetings, is that even if that well gets contaminated or someone gets sick, okay, Harrington, it could, nothing to do with that. It could be the best dirt in the world. Because it was a controlled substance from DEP, Hubbardston will be pulled in the lawsuit. Whether or not it's true or not, who knows? But they could be possibly pulled into this thing, and that site could go bad any time. And if you talk to them, they know that. So if we have this,
Who knows that? What do you mean?
the city of Gardner knows that there's a bad site near their well, near their
Harrington Richards.
Harrington Richards site near their well. So they're worried about it, but I can guarantee you, if some kid gets sick anywhere in Gardner because of the water, and that water comes to the Gardner, from that Gardner well, and they get 30% of their water, and what we were told the other day is they get 30% of it, but most of the time when they get their water, it's like in July and August, did he say? Whenever the
Yeah,
chloroform,
what he said was the open reservoir water sources are great in the winter and less great in the summer when algae starts to grow and whatnot. And so in the winter, they're not taking very much out of this well, and in the summer, they're taking a lot of this well, a lot of water out of this well. And over the average of the year, they take about 30% of their water from the well.
but when they,
You know, you might be taking 90%
yeah,
in
but when-
July and
when the-
0% in January.
What they said is when they take in the water, they're taking all the water. So, just with the scenario of some kid somewhere in Gardner getting sick, and they trace the sickness to that well, and they now they know this project. Now it's maybe, $13 million ton thing. The potential of it. Even if we're not guilty, we're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars defending ourselves.
So my plan on the barrage of questions that, in my head I hadn't fully formulated, but that would ask, was itching to ask questions like that if it was ever presented to us, which is always why I've always been like, let's just hear it. I want to hear this thing so that we can, and that's where, and then it went back and forth between who gets to hear it first or who should hear it and all that sort of thing. So, trust me, I agree, and I know that that's not the only one. There are.
I know there's a bunch more.
So-
There's a big industrial park up there. They have lots of bad sites in
No,
that
he's
area.
saying it's not his only concern.
Oh yeah, I know. Okay, but I mean,
Is that correct?
That's correct.
yeah. So, anyways, to move off Gardner, so where were we? We were around January. So January, our first meeting, we met with Norman Brown, and I think he did say to Anita, and may have said to the selectmen that we pretty much roughed him up. But we asked him a lot of hard questions.
Oh,
Okay.
wait a minute. I didn't ask him any yards. I asked
I
him
did.
how many yards is it? How big is it?
Right. He said, no, Tom said that. How big is this project? We have no idea. Yet he had actually already formulated a proposal that, and I have documents showing that it was
Yeah, it
we're
was
right
this
here.
one, yeah.
Well, no, it's this one right here. This was done before
Yeah, but
that.
this is what he brought in
But that
with
was
his
brought in
engineer.
February.
That was,
That was at the first meeting.
No, it wasn't.
Well, he had drawings like that he put up on an easel for us,
Yeah.
but he didn't leave them with us.
But that was presented
That
in
was
February.
presented to the select board on February, the date there.
March seventh. This
Oh,
is,
March 7th.
yeah, but this was the plan that he brought in. Now, it may
Yeah.
not have been with this cover letter, but it was brought in by his engineer from New Hampshire,
Yeah.
Fieldstone, and he showed it all to us and said, this is what we're proposing to do. And he called it a reclamation plan, the engineer did. That was in January.
Yeah, but he didn't leave those drawings with us. He packed them up and took them
Yeah, he
with
took,
him.
yeah,
Yeah,
this,
yeah.
this came in March.
But he couldn't answer these questions, and one of my hard questions to him, which I get animated sometimes, a little bit excited, but my last question I asked him was, I said, Norman, if you're not allowed to put this thing in, are you gonna reclaim the pit like you're supposed to? And I didn't even know to the extent, I hadn't been up there in 20 years. And he said, no, he's not gonna do it. So,
Well, we asked him why,
oh yeah, we said why.
and he said he doesn't have any money, he doesn't have any dirt.
But later to find out, well, I know two companies that do this, RPI and, I forget the name of the other company.
Doesn't matter.
So there's
Yeah.
two companies that supply, they do this, they'll it, and if if the town ends up getting stuck with the pit, someone just walks away and gives it to us. There's two companies out that will come in and reclaim the pit, put all the slopes correctly, mix in the dirt with, the paper they get from Irving Mill. It doesn't cost anyone anything, it's free, doesn't cost them. And Norman Brown says that he doesn't have the money. I talked to both of those companies. One of the companies says he's tried to get in his door to ask him about doing this work for him here and other places. And the other company says, well, we already work with Norman Brown. He knows that. We've already done it. We did a quarter of the pit up there. That's how I got the information in my letter. So
Right,
he
so
wasn't, but
Well,
at
let's
that
move
meeting.
We're approaching Christmas.
Yeah,
I know,
let's
but
move
well,
on.
the one other important thing is that, and it goes back to this thing here. He told us at that meeting that, and he was in here paying his taxes, which were overdue again. But anyways, he was paying his taxes, and then Nita came up to him and said, "What are you going to do with that big hole in the ground?" And she says, "I've got an idea about filling that hole in the ground." I'm paraphrasing, obviously. But
Yeah,
what you guys?
he said that Anita approached him to fill in the pit. He,
And then.
yeah, I mean, you know,
I mean,
we know, we know.
And then she
And,
says,
you know,
he-
let
he
me
had-
qualify this before we go any further. I mean, I really wanna add this. This is not an indictment of Anita, okay? This is just as we have read it and as we heard it from Mr. Brown that evening.
Mm.
And it just gives the impression that there is the need for this type of discussion, this type of meeting to find out, really, you know,
absolutely.
where are we doing? How is it going? Are we the people here who will find out later on down the road that something happened that we didn't know about? Or are we gonna be actively involved and not have egg on our face when somebody comes to us and said, hey, you should have known this?
Because also, one of the duties, I would say, of the town administrator is to investigate alternative revenue sources, specifically in small towns like ours where they're limited. I'm just saying, you know,
Yeah,
so,
I don't have a
you know,
problem with that.
one of them would be, you know, putting water and sewer for $8 million down Main Street. Not so much. I'm just throwing them out there, so.
Correct.
That
And no,
could be
like I
part of
said,
the
we're
course
not
of-
indicting
Indicting it.
anybody here.
We're just
Right.
trying to present what we
Yeah.
found in the facts, and part of it is, I know there's been some hard feelings, okay, and a few issues which we're trying to put away here tonight, but there's a reason why we've done a lot of these things, and I kinda wanna go through these documents that we found and also kind of explain where we were coming from, and I tried to explain it to people before, but it's like, and then you take that message, that what he said, and then you read this, and then you look at Anita's husband's works for a company like that. Not saying she did anything wrong. I'm just saying it's not so good, you know. Anyway, that's where we were coming from. So in January, anyways, January 2nd, we met with Norman Brown, and then January 26th, Norman Brown starts asking the town for money for his pit because he's saying it's closed.
He wants his deposit
He
back.
wants his deposit back, yeah. And there's a bunch of emails about that.
Was our town attorney asked, is the pit closed?
That
I
was-
need Jessica, I mean, that email.
That was the, discussion, if you remember, after Dave Dasky presented his letter saying that this is probably a planning board issue, that's when Mr. Brown came back and said, no, my pit's closed, so it wouldn't be a planning board issue. And that's when there was, if you remember, there was emails back and forth between Mr. Brown's office team and the attorney with, there's a deposit, there's the contract, I mean, I don't remember the specifics anymore, but it was back and forth. He was saying it was closed, here's the evidence, and then we couldn't find some of the evidence, so, that was what, in March, April timeframe sometime?
When did you guys initiate your town-wide pit review?
Well, we started that when
Which
the,
I assume is peripherally related.
It is
Yes.
peripherally related,
Okay,
it
sorry.
is.
Yes.
Well, it is and
Well,
it isn't.
It was active before Brown approached us.
yeah, we basically started this in 2010, if I'm not mistaken. And maybe 2008, when we reviewed the entire gravel removal operations that we had on the books. And they were totally inadequate. And at the time, they were under zoning. And zoning has an interesting way about it, whereby if you do something under zoning and it's allowed, if things change under zoning and you're still doing it, the zoning change doesn't affect you. You know, you get the grandfather clause in there. So what we did, in conjunction with Bill Murray, our consultant, is we rewrote the zoning bylaw. And we made the gravel removal bylaw a general bylaw. Because general bylaws don't have any grandfathering clause. And what we said in that, if you may have read it, is the fact that we've had issue after issue with gravel pits. When we started in 2008, the first person who came forth voluntarily to go along with the permit we had was Jeff Hackler. You know, he has a small pit out behind his house. Spent a lot of money on an engineer, went there. No one else came forth. And then we revised it and, you know, worked with Bill. We came up with the rules and regulations, and we revised it again, and we came back in September 2010, and the town accepted the gravel removal bylaw that we have now. Many of the changes were that there needs to be accountability for all the pits. The planning board had enforcement, and zoning officer would work in conjunction with us, and all the pits had to conform to the general bylaw. That, you know, and zoning now makes no mention to gravel at all. There is no allowable gravel removal under zoning. It's all under general. And it was intentional because we didn't want anybody to say, oh, I'm grandfathered, I can keep working. So we worked on it, and quite frankly, it's been tough getting some of the momentum going on this. But about September or October, we had a renewed interest in all of this, and the first thing we did was issue a cease and desist order on the Fletcher pit, which is south of our pit on Pitcherville Road, because they started operating and
Across the street.
across the street. They started operating, and the police department was reporting that they were running trucks out of there and wanted to know if they had a pit, had a permit. So Mr. Fletcher came in, and he says, well, we're grandfathered. We explained it all to him. He says, okay, we'll stop. And, we issued a cease and desist, I'm sorry. Cease and desist there, and a cease and desist on Lead the Way Development, which is further west of our pit, on the north side of Pitcherville. And there was a big hole there. Well, Fletcher came in and agreed to work with us, go through everything, and brought in an engineer, and they ran into a glitch with the natural heritage people who stopped everything they wanted to do. So they're not doing anything in the pit, but they will reclaim it. That's their statement to us. Lead the Way Development came in, and they turned out to have had, unbeknownst to me, because I wasn't on the board in 2011, and nobody was here that evening that was there, that being Mark Dimick, who was chair at that point. He wasn't there that evening. He had permission from that planning board to extract gravel so he could build houses there. So that worked out. And he was under a cease and desist. And those have been the two actions that the planning board has taken to try to get all these gravel permits back into compliance.
I disagree with you. There's also a fall line.
Well, yes, but that was on their own.
Yeah, well, they did an excellent job.
Yeah, Fall Line, which is the company, or it's actually the ownership of 66 acres north on 68, west, which used to be the old Andrews Turkey Farm. I don't know if you remember that. It was a tremendous problem back 2004, 2005, because Mr. Andrews, in conjunction with a man out of Northborough, decided he wanted to take and extract all the gravel, crush all the rock, and he did so under the guise of an agricultural project. And in fact, he had an attorney from the National Agricultural Department called.
USDA?
Yeah, that's them. He called me up, he says, you can't tell him to stop. I said, look, here's what he's doing, go take a look. He called me back and said, okay, we're not gonna get involved in this because he's doing what you said he's doing. He was polluting Hubbardston Brook with the runoff, and we finally stopped him. Or actually, EAP stopped him. Environmental EPA. EPA came in. So they stopped him, and then he was responsible for the reclamation, and then Tom Christopher Engineering came in under this lady who bought the property from him, and they reclaimed it with Mr. Andrews dying. He's moved on. He's not in town anymore. They did a nice job. I don't know if you've seen it down there, but it's like a park. It really is a nice job, and it's primarily all that same kind of soil that comes out of Irving paper. So that was one of the others that came about with the permit. The third permit we had came when Marinelli sold their business or their land to a gentleman, I believe he was out of Millbury, and I honestly can't remember his name. And he came in and he did the permitting, but he didn't last long. He ended up losing the business, and Marinelli had to take it back at auction. And so he had that permit to mine. It didn't work, and he lost the business. We also had a member on the board, Peter Jeffs, who had gone down there and was actively researching this 2012, I want to say, and ran into some gypsy who was down there stealing the dirt before we closed the pit up. And the guy got all excited when Peter approached him and said, you shouldn't be doing this. There's no active gravel permits down here for this. And so he ended up having a big argument and confrontation with Peter, and that didn't work out too well. So this is how it's pretty much transpired, and now we've taken those additional steps. And I guess I could say that it's been a maturation process where we finally realize what we can do and how we should be doing it. And the more activity down there that is not approved and illegal, and the more ATVs that run around, and the more jeopardy that the town is in because we're not paying attention, is what really motivated us. And I think we were here a year and a half ago to the select board where we asked them to lock the gate because we found out that road is a private road owned by us, not by the, and nobody has an easement over that like everybody thought they did. So that's when we started locking that gate, and it's by permission only at this point. So, that's
Okay.
pretty much a
Well,
summation
the other
of
thing
how
that
we all did it.
The other thing came is, what's the people down there, Catystos came into the select board and we got
Yeah,
involved
but
there.
that's recently.
I
right?
know, but
They
that's-
wanted to know when we started it all.
I know, we started
Yeah.
it, but
It's ongoing.
Thank you for the history there, right, but it sort of restarted with vigor several months ago.
I wouldn't say. it was-
Probably in the fall with those cease and desist orders. And I'll tell you the truth. It ends up being how active of a board do you have? You've seen it. We've all participated in democratic situations. And when an issue comes up, and when we have, like we have here, and I'll tell you, we have a wonderful group of people on the planning board. We always have, but issues come forth that sometimes get a lot of action and sometimes don't. It's just the way people work. We all have lives. We're all volunteers, and so the activity came about last fall in a more active and participatory way from the planning board than ever before. But preceding Norman Brown's proposal. This whole issue came afterwards. We were actively pursuing the compliance before any of this issue came up.
My first meetings with the planning board were about, we had, the Lead the Way Development coming in here and Fletcher's. That was my first meeting.
Yeah, and that was in the fall.
I'd just like to say that this is not just about dirt or pollution or whatever we're talking about. It's about people. There was a guy life flighted out of a pit down here not very long ago. And I talked to the chief of police, and there was one maybe a year and a half or so ago.
The guy life flight, it wasn't even from Hubbardston, he was from
New
Framingham.
Hampshire.
Yeah, he was
Newton,
outside of
somewhere
town.
It
area.
doesn't matter.
Right, but
It's-
it's not even, there's people coming in from far away to go into those pits.
Right.
Well, they're big pits.
I know,
They're
absolutely.
a playground, but there are sheer cliffs. And our health and safety expert over here has said, you know, we could be exposed as a town because we're not enforcing the various laws that say there shouldn't be cliffs. And so when someone sues, they always look for somebody that has deep pockets. And it's obvious that some of these pit owners don't have deep pockets because they hide behind the veil of an LLC. But the town may be attacked or confronted with claims. So it's not just about dirt, it's about people getting hurt, life flighted out of here. I don't know what happened to the fellow, but I understand he lived. I think he has a very serious back injury.
And it's an expense to the town because the police are down there more often. There's all kinds of surveillance, that, you know.
But
But-
I think Dan's getting at too is, why did all of a sudden Norman Brown's come up, okay? There's reasonable expectation. My expectation, the reason Browns came up to the forefront, well, first off, we did lead the way, so I was familiar with that. But, and we've gotta fast forward now that after Dineski made his ruling in March, I think it's March 15th, was it the 15th? Well, anyways, 2 days after he made the ruling, Norman Brown's attorney sent a letter to our attorney or to you, or I forget who it was. The town received a letter from Norman Brown's attorney claiming that this project was 100% closed and that he thinks it should be under the jurisdiction of the building inspector, but we'll get to later. But that, the reaction, the inspection of that pit, to me, triggered to, and we discussed this at an open meeting, we said, Norman Brown's saying his pit is 100% closed. Is it closed? Let's go look. And we said, let's go look at it. And we invited Norman, obviously he owns the pit, we invited him, we invited you. And the next day, we get an email from Norman Brown's attorney saying you're not allowed to go on his property. So, and then I had to write that report from visually looking at it from a distance, from the town property.
But just to be clear, he said he wasn't available, he would meet at a different time.
No, he did not say that.
You know, he said that first, and then when we said we're still going to have the site meeting
I didn't
because
see
we've
that.
scheduled it, that's when he came down with the edict that you're not allowed on the property. So you're right, you know.
I didn't
Yeah.
know that. I haven't got to that email yet.
Well, go ahead, let's get these emails.
Well, anyways, basically, we can just cut through all this stuff. So we're in January now. We met with Norman Brown. He starts getting excited. He pulls the meeting. I think we wanted to we felt that it was a planning board issue, and we asked the select board and Anita to get a ruling from town attorney. Is there anything else happened in between there? There's nothing really, much emails.
That took a while.
It took 6 weeks for Dineski to make that, and not a whole lot happened, except that Rob from Norman Brown's attorney kept emailing back and forth with Anita. I mean, there's lots of emails about this and about that. So, and he also came in and he came in
This
March
was
6th.
March 7th.
7th. And he came in with this thing. Norman Brown came to our meeting and he goes, who am I supposed to do a proposal to? And we thought it was us, and we're waiting for everyone's waiting for Mr. Dineski's decision. And we get his decision, and I read the decision thinking it was all in the bellywork of the planning board. but there wasn't, and there was something in there that said, if the pit was closed, 100% closed, and he wanted to bring this use into the town, then it would be up to the building inspector to make a determination.
It wasn't actually the building inspector, it was the zoning board of appeals and who enforces the, I'm just clarifying, I don't think it was specifically the building inspector, it was a department, but the building inspector was the agent that acts on enforcement of that department.
No, I think the building
I
inspector.
think we better be careful if we're gonna try to interpret Doneski's.
Well, whatever,
Sure,
the
sure,
way the
sure.
zoning, the way the zoning bylaw reads, okay,
There is no zoning bylaw on gravel.
I know, but any new use or anything gets
Any use that's not listed
is,
is prohibited.
the zoning board of appeal comes after Larry makes a determination whether or not this is actually.
I misspoke, I meant based on the zoning bylaw, it's the
Right.
building inspector, it's not necessarily just, I understand.
Yeah, so it was the building inspector's, you were here, I asked that's the question I asked him. If this is a new use, remember I asked him this question? Who makes a decision whether that new use is allowed? And Mr. Dineski said the building inspector has that authority in determining the zoning bylaw. Okay? And as a result of that comment, the planning board wrote that decision. But that decision came back.
Finding.
No, a
Finding.
letter.
That finding letter saying that in our opinion, and Larry's not bound by that obviously, but in our opinion, this is not, if it is a new use, it is not approved but in zoning. And we laid out in that finding, you know, our position on it. And I think if Larry wanted to make a decision, and I had this conversation with Brianne, if Larry had that conversation, or made that decision that was contrary to what our finding was, it's obviously his right to do that. Dineski said it was his right to do that. But he has to do it. He has to write down why he's gonna change that decision. You know, why he's going against us. And that was the entire purpose of that. So we were basically giving Larry our opinion. He didn't ask for it, and I'm saying he didn't ask for it, but we feel obviously very strongly about this project, so we were saying if this is a new use, we feel that it's not an approved in our zoning, so it would not be allowed.
And so where does that stand? From
Well-
Larry's standpoint?
Well, it's funny you say that, because after we wrote that letter, there's a barrage of emails from Norman Brown's attorney, from Norman Brown, from Rob, and Anita going back, and it appears by reading these emails, and I guess you'd have to have an attorney read everything and make a determination, but it certainly appeared to me reading all these emails, and there was I think there was 14 of them, that Anita was putting pressure on Larry to make sure that this use was gonna be accepted. And Larry actually wrote a letter to you. Did you guys read it? It was a letter saying that he was trying to give you the decision whether or not this is an allowable use or not. He was, and I kind of feel bad for Larry because he was kind of be rocking a hard place. But Larry's read it. You didn't see that?
That was April 14th, 17th, something like that.
Yeah. And Anita was, my opinion, Anita was putting tremendous pressure on Larry to give that. And then Larry writes this letter, which is very unclear. First off, he said, in one letter Larry wrote it was allowed, and then another letter he wrote it wasn't allowed, and then the pressure was mounting on him, and he wrote a letter saying that he's basically trying to give that authority to the selectmen.
I don't remember.
Tom, do you have that letter
seeing
to-
a
I
letter.
don't-
Let me
Okay.
see if I can dredge it up here, keep
I
going.
don't know April, cause I would've remembered that.
Cause you started what, second week in April?
11th, yeah.
So anyways, my read of that was, well, first off, Larry can't abdicate his decision. He can't give that decision to you, the select board, he can't give that to the planning board. That is his decision to make. The general bylaw, and the zoning bylaw says that he has to make that decision. And that's where the decision lies today.
And that's, but if that's if the pit was closed.
Hmm?
I mean, that's only if the pit was closed.
That's only if the pit was
It was
closed,
closed,
which we all,
No one believes that,
No.
right? This is
Yeah.
just
You-
Well,
Norman's.
Mr. Brown doesn't believe it.
do you believe it's closed? Have you been down?
Oh, I've been down there.
Do you
I
think it's
mean,
closed?
No, I mean, it looks like all the other pits, except for where he did reclaim some of the
Right.
vacuums.
Dan, have you been down there to look at it?
Yes.
You're an expert in this sort of field. Is it closed? Or?
Doesn't appear to be, but I'm not gonna say I'm an expert in closure of pits.
Okay. Anyway,
Well, let me go back
I'm not ignoring you.
with one other important thing that we really need to, all of us, focus on. It had to be, maybe it is almost 3 years ago, when Dan and I sat on the enforcement committee that was chaired with Anita,
Yep.
about the disconnect in town of enforcement of bylaws, general and zoning.
Yep.
And we sat there for many, many nights trying to come up with ideas on how to enforce different things, and why we should do that.
Yep.
And I would honestly say that that might have been a big impetus in this enforcement through the gravel bylaws, because from the planning board's aspect, it's really the only,
here it is, actually.
it's the only bylaw that authorizes the planning board
It's one of
to
them.
do what we can do.
And to have a building inspector act on enforcement.
Correct.
I'm gonna make.
By, by what we recommend. And when we say Larry issued a cease and desist, Larry issues it, because we have that authority. I can read it to you here out of the bylaw.
Yeah, yeah.
But, that came up, and we then started with the enforcement idea that we had, in this case, Bill Murray, doing many reviews of situations that would help Larry make enforcement decisions. And we even passed that at the town meeting, where they appropriated, what, $5,000-6,000 to pay Bill Murray or whomever it may be. So, that's how those cease and desist orders came about, because Bill did reviews on both of those pits, Fletcher's and Lead the Ways. And after he gave those to the planning board, we recommended Larry. So we have topos and all the reports that Bill does. He does a wonderful job. So that's where this enforcement comes in. And it's still an issue in town. It even came up the other night at the public hearing, when one of the citizens asked us, enforcement just doesn't happen. And he was pretty upset about the sign bylaw not being enforced.
Yeah.
Signs everywhere. So it's still that kind of a situation. And if you want me to give you my best honest opinion on why we're doing this, it's probably because it's the only thing we have the authority to do, and it came out of the spirit of that meeting. So that's why we're doing it, more than anything else. And targeting nobody in particular, but hopefully getting it all done. And in the bylaw, one of the most important parts about it, and obviously it's been ignored, is the fact that it's hoped that the people with these sites come in and do it. They have an obligation to do it under the bylaw. Not us go after them, but them bringing it to fruition, and bringing it to fruition under the bylaw as it exists. Within 30 days, existing operations without a permits of this bylaw, each existing operation without a permit shall meet with the planning board to discuss a process for development of a transition plan to bring the site into compliance. No one, even the town didn't come in, it's tough, it's a tough call, and this is a tough bylaw, and we're hoping it can be prevailing and help the town out to get everybody in compliance.
So anyways, this period of time between January and, Nesky's letter was interesting, because Ben was out sick, he abandoned us. So we were on our
I knew it
own.
was my fault somehow.
So Tom and I were, everyone in the committee went to the select board several times. You probably remember, we kept asking about this, we don't know anything. There's no proposal.
And just so you know, we were 100%.
I'm
Truthful.
not, I can honestly say, in the records that I've seen here, there is no indication that the select board knew any of this. Anita was going back and forth like crazy. None of you, there was no copies, that you've seen this stuff too. There's no copies to this board of selectmen, or you people there, so I can see that. And you kept saying there's no permit, there's no proposal, thank you. But he came in on the 8th, March 7th, with this proposal,
I remember that.
and he said there's not a proposal. Except, on March 6th, there's this proposal.
The draft soil management plan?
Yep. That's it. I printed it out, all 381 pages, and he submitted that to the DEP. And with Anita, back and forth with DEP saying the Conservation Commission is all set, until Tom stepped in to get that, this was on fast track to be approved, my opinion. Your opinion?
Yes, it was, DEP allows a rather streamlined process, and that was reinforced one night by Anita. I was here and I said, is there gonna be a public hearing? And she said, there's no legal obligation to have a public hearing. And, you know, I'm not very quick. But if I was sitting at the table tonight and she said that to me, I'd say, well, sometimes you don't have to do just what's the legal obligation. You have to do what's right. You have to put it before the people so that people know about it. They don't just have it happen to them.
Which was always something we were advocating for
I
as
think-
well.
Yeah,
I
I know
think
you were, I know you were.
stated that at a
On-
number of your
You
On
did.
in December of
You did. I agree with all
2015,
this is new.
another group of information that he submitted to this, to Anita about all the site conditions and everything, which has included a lot of that in there.
Did that 300-page report come to Anita, or was that only given to the DEP?
I don't know where it went.
I
know
haven't
that
found
did
it
go
in
to
any
the
emails
DEP.
yet.
They go to the DEP.
So the
DEP
plan that was put on, sorry to interrupt, but, no, finish that, I'm sorry.
And that goes with this,
The
this plan goes with
DEP
this.
then
So
takes
the-
that.
So the plans I remember, because you guys got a copy, we got a copy of
Mhm.
the drawings, but
Right,
I mean, none of us ever got a copy of that big fat.
No, none of us.
no, none of us did.
But
I-
that went to the
I gave you
DEP.
5 pages of it, because on the 5th page it says the pit isn't closed.
Okay.
His
I
own
remember.
words, pit is partially closed.
So I'm trying to remember, that when we got that plan, which was a draft, I remember looking at it at the meeting and whatnot, and looking at the contours and saying, yeah,
Th-
there's a whole
this
bunch
one,
of-
though.
Yeah.
there's a bunch of
This
text
one,
down,
yeah,
the
not
actual
the big one.
physical site plan or whatever.
It's more just architectural drawings.
But it was presented not as a presentation, it was like a, this is where we're at.
Well, actually, the meeting before that, at the
Okay.
at the planning board's meeting, Norman Brown said he will not put a plan forward until the attorney makes a decision, remember that? You were at that meeting.
That
He-
submittal actually has a letter from his attorney. There's the cover letter,
Mm.
Mark submitted for approval, a letter from his attorney, and then the 4 drawings.
Right, and then he said at our meeting that he says, I will not put a plan forward to the select board, to the planning board, anyone, until this issue of jurisdiction was over. You were at that meeting.
So honestly, like, we
And
got
then
that.
he came, this is why, to be honest with you, Dan, you know, this is why we got kind of excited here. Cause Norman Brown's saying one thing, and then literally, that was on a Tuesday, and he came in your next meeting and submitted a plan. And then we find out later about this big plan to DEP. I mean, honestly, you guys are in the dark. This is all going on, and I'm pretty sure neither from these emails knew that he had done that.
Well, in my opinion, what I'd always been expecting, and I'm not gonna speak for you guys, but, I wasn't just expecting a plan, a physical plan.
You were
but
expecting that document.
Or no, not just that either, but here's the plan. Here's my engineer, here's my, that's what I was talking about before, is getting ready to ask the hard questions like you talked about, and then this one, and then this one, and having Bill here to ask his and all that, was that forum to be able to do it, and that's what I've always been
That's what I
waiting
was
for.
expecting too,
Yeah.
a big production where they have all the engineers there and everything else.
Correct.
Interestingly enough, and it must have been in January, cause I was out from February on, they came in to the planning board with his surveyor, his engineer, his water quality control lady,
Yeah.
his chemist,
His trucker,
his trucker, his chemist, and they showed us where they had dug the test holes. They had already drilled, rather, test wells, and where they were gonna drill. They did everything that you're talking about with us.
And
And
they
what-
scheduled it with us once, but I remember the LSP couldn't come
Yes.
to the meeting.
Uh-huh.
This was in between, I don't remember exactly when, time frame, I don't have a stack of papers like Tom in front of me. No.
Believe me, you're lucky.
No, but really, but that was, you know,
that time,
yes.
Yeah.
But-
I'm organized, I got my
Okay.
tabs and.
Well, he just threw them at the middle of the room now, so they're not in front of him anymore, I guess. But still, that's, when that meeting was canceled, and then this was going over who gets, or who's gonna receive the proposal, all this was just happening, all in parallel. you
So
know?
what,
And then,
since you brought up the LSP, how did that come about? Sorry, Ben.
No, go ahead.
I'm louder than you. The LSP, the select board had virtually hired an LSP.
I think Anita selected possible.
Right, and that came up because
We're just doing our
that
due diligence.
that very initial time he came in the other room and presented his maps and plans, and I think there was a hydrologist there to kind of talk about.
Hydrologist, that's what it
It
was.
was the same night he came in here and talked to us.
Oh,
Was it, I don't-
Same team, yeah.
Yep.
So, you know, when he first kind of threw the idea out, it was, I believe Anita said we need to, if he's gonna continue down this road, we need to hire an LSP to be our expert.
who reads that,
So we're not just reliant on,
and he pays for it.
right, he pays for it, so we're not just relying on his information, that we have to believe.
Well, it's interesting because Anita had a contract with this guy and Dineski was reviewing the contract.
That's
what,
what, well, I
LSP?
think that's,
Yeah.
we're explaining why. I mean, that's due diligence to say if a plan is coming forward, for us to have a third party queued up to be able to take a look at it and be an expert to actually review it. So I mean,
That wasn't December before all this other stuff happened too. You did know all about that, the records.
We.
Oh, no
knew that-
question.
Yeah, no, we knew
And that
about
was
it.
just a straight up, I mean, we didn't know much about anything, but
Right.
we knew that, you know, based on an initial poster board presentation, we need an expert on our side too.
Well, after that meeting that he came in, and my recollection is a little fuzzy, but that's when they decided not to give this proposal. And honestly, it was because of the questions that everybody asked at the planning board of these people. And they walked away saying, well, maybe we're not ready for this yet. And that's when they decided not to present that proposal.
We asked a lot of those questions in there too.
Yeah, I think they were a little surprised that, you know, Hubbardston had a little bit more wherewithal about what was going on than
Yeah, no,
they
I
thought we were
remember-
gonna have.
I remember them being surprised. I mean, you're an expert in the field, obviously, is what you, some of what you do.
Again, we're not gonna put expert on record because that's got its own legal
Never mind.
connotations.
So you have knowledge in the area.
Yes.
Bill Murray was there, and the two of them were asking some very, very hard and pointed questions to the team, and I remember that being,
And when I showed up for we talked about the site visit long ago. It happened after a meeting I couldn't quite get to. That's the first thing I did is I sat and presented myself. You know, hi, I'm Dan Galante, Hubbardston Select Board Chair. This is what I do for the last 20 years. And so they had their group of people around as well, just to say, look, we're responsible and we're educated in this field, so let's go. Again, this is months and months and months ago, before any of this sort of stuff happened. But they had to get that impression right off the bat. That
That was his first time we actually met him,
Yep, right.
the first time.
So anyway,
Well, you know, the story, I mean, the whole book is coming together here, chapter after chapter, and, you know, I don't know where it's gonna go, but I think it's informative and it's helpful. It's certainly putting, and I missed about 3 months of all of this, of course, so it's good for me to hear it too.
and that letter, by the way, is from Larry Brandt, the one you gave to me. I don't ever remember seeing that. I don't know if you guys remember.
I don't remember.
I just went through my emails too, from that I'm pretty detailed about where I put stuff. I didn't.
Yeah.
I forget it, I don't, maybe I see that?
You, s-
I'm pretty sure I know it, but I just wanna see
yeah.
which one it was.
It was addressed
March
to
11th.
Anita.
So anyways,
not the select
Dineski made, I think we were up to Dineski, aren't we, Mr. Dineski? So all this time, you know, Norman Brown is so from
No, that's not it.
mid-January
Never
to, when did Dineski do his letter? To
Middle of March.
15th.
Middle of March sometime, yeah. He was,
Yeah, here we go.
this whole thing was proceeding along. I mean, the DEP's position is, you know, the Conservation Commission is fine, which is I can't underestimate how huge that is. You know, if they're okay with this, even though it's in a Zone 2 place, Zone 2 place, it's good. Town of Garden,
Sorry, can I just add to that?
yeah.
And so there's that, and then he's seemingly got every right to go to DEP.
Of course he does, yeah.
Right. So just
No, I have no.
Yeah.
No, on his original proposal, when he first came in, he said he can't get any approval from DEP until there's approval from
the executive body or something. or other.
Exactly.
Mm.
It all hinges on that. DEP will not write a consent order if there is no approval from the board that's looking over this.
But our point is, this whole thing is rolling along. You know, the whole thing is rolling around, and if you look at it from our point of view, you know, all we need is the selectmen to vote at a meeting, this is okay, and those trucks have been rolling. Because he's done all of this work behind the scene, and Anita is pushing along this stuff. But then we roll into Mr. Dineski's letter, which I read saying it was the select board, the planning board's responsibility, unless it was a new use. We all know, we already talked about that. But the select board just didn't seem to think, my opinion was that, and I think, Dan, you even said that you don't believe that. You thought it was with the select board's decision.
Sorry.
Jurisdiction over.
Jurisdiction.
You said you didn't agree with Doneski's letter.
I don't know if I said that. I said that there's a statement in there that can be, isn't cut and dry, and I think that goes into the building inspector piece of it that the Norman Brown side had put on. So I wasn't agreeing or disagreeing. I was basically saying that as I read that whole thing too. As soon as I got it, pulled over on the side of the road, read, got to that last line and went,
What?
or second to last line, wherever
Whatever
it was.
yeah. I think it's pretty clear. I mean, if it's a new use, then it goes to the building inspector. That's why I asked that question that night. That's exactly why. I had read that thing 6 times.
Yeah.
It's hard to read.
And I wasn't I was just giving my impression on reading it, saying, can holes be shot in this?
Well,
So
why wouldn't my question to the select board is why after he wrote that letter, didn't the select board just say to the planning board, here, this is yours?
Or say to Mr. Brown,
Or say to Mr. Brown.
go to the other door.
I mean, up until May 2nd,
Can I answer that? Because I was waiting for a letter from the building inspector.
why would you be waiting for, I thought you didn't
Because
get
there
a
was
letter.
some interpretation issue that was in that letter that I thought that was supposed to be being looked into. It wasn't because of lack of interest. It wasn't because better things to do. It was waiting on a final ruling. I personally didn't feel as though there was a final ruling.
No, and especially that night, there was the attorney from Mr. Brown and Danesky was here going back and forth about whether or not the pit's closed. And then it was several weeks after that where there was emails going back and forth, which we were included in, with letters from 10 years ago, all this kind of stuff that they were trying to prove the pit was closed, back and forth. So for probably a month after that, there was a lot of back and forth about, is it closed, is it not closed, is it closed, is it not closed, which would have affected remarkably the outcome of who the final permitting authority was at that
Well,
point.
it's pretty clear if you read we planted that out in our finding, that if it is not closed, or if it is closed, then it's not a allowable use. I mean, and I know I wrote part of the finding. It's pretty clear to me, if it's not closed, would you agree it was clearly under the jurisdiction of the planning board? Would you agree with that?
Yes,
Yes.
I would.
Yeah, okay. If it is closed, then it would go to the zoning, and Larry got to,
No, careful. That's not what it says. The only time Larry comes into this is if the town does not choose to exercise earth removal bylaw jurisdiction to that extent, meaning by the planning board under 19.
Right, yeah.
It is my view that reclamation activity beyond that required and approved in the 2004 permit renewal is subject to the provisions of the zoning bylaw and a determination of allowed use. So that is only if the town chooses to not do something, the building inspector can enter the picture.
Only to determine of allowable use.
Yes, and at the end of that sentence, it's provisions of the zoning bylaw and the determination of allowable use. That's when you asked Doneski, who makes that determination? He
Right.
said, building inspector.
right,
But the sentence reads that if the town does not choose to exercise earth removal bylaw jurisdiction, which was defined earlier in the letter as being planning board. So if the planning board says, we're not gonna do with it, then
and
the other sentence would,
just fast forwarding to our request to have discussions with Danesky. I was kinda surprised you wouldn't have asked Danesky. Why would you ask Larry that? I would have thought that would have been a legal question, but that's the question, correct, that you wanted to ask Danesky?
I have no question about Doneski's letter.
I know, we wanna know who had the authority, yes, that was my understanding.
Well, that was the question a long time ago,
Yeah.
and then he answered it, and I think he answered it effectively.
Okay.
See, that's the point though, is, and I'm not, we're just here talking.
Yeah,
I know, I just need to keep saying that.
Calm down.
But that's not, I don't think everybody who reads that feels like you do. I'm not saying I don't or do, I'm just saying everyone who reads that, it's not cut and dry, so that's what I was sort of waiting for some closure on, you know?
Well, why wouldn't you have asked Danesky for that closure that you had? Why would you ask Larry?
Well, no, we did ask Danesky, and that's why there was reams of information going back and forth. about whether or not the pit was closed or not closed, and that was,
I know, but that information was, and I've read all that, and that is really only about whether the pit is closed or not closed.
Which ties into,
I know, I
Yeah.
realize that.
If you
Directly.
search this letter, the word closed isn't in it.
no, but it references the bylaw, which does reference closed,
Mhm.
so,
No,
And then Brown's attorney
it
brought
says,
that up.
Brown's
Brown's
attorney
attorney.
uses that term, it's not a term used in our bylaw. Our bylaw
Right,
uses
right, right.
reclaim.
we were, just to make it simple, instead of sitting here splitting hairs about words and this and that, 'cause
Yeah,
none of us are
thank you.
attorneys. We were waiting for, a definitive answer, because when we left that meeting, there was question about whether the pit is closed, and Dave Dineski said this is an important thing that we have to figure out to clarify his letter. And then, if you guys were included too, the back and forth of monies and deposits and bank checks and all this other kind of stuff. So we were waiting for a final clarification, a final ruling as to pit closed or not closed, and how that affects his letter.
But-
because we agree with what we agreed to a minute ago, as far as.
I know, but up until May 8th, you had agreed at the select board's meeting, May 2nd and May 8th, that you agreed to allow Norman Brown to come in to present his proposal to you and to Larry at a select board's meeting, not at a planning board's meeting.
He wanted to present it to Larry, but he wanted the select board present. I believe
He was
that's what
presenting
said.
it to the select board and Larry. That's what it says.
He wanted to present it to Larry and have the cameras. That's why he said.
Or whatever. Why wouldn't you have you said, look, this, and you, by May, we'd all pretty much concluded correctly that pit wasn't closed. So even if that last sentence was in play a month earlier in April, pretty much by the time I finished writing my report, and you guys just general knowledge of it, and everyone pretty much in April decided or agreed, or at least the pit was closed, that definitely was coming back to the planning board. That would make it come back to the planning board, but you were allowing him. Why didn't you just say, Norman, you need to go to the planning
Well,
board?
I think what Michael just said is we didn't know it was closed, but we didn't get that.
We didn't get a final
Final
clarification from
confirmation.
Dineski.
When did
We
he,
still
when did he
have-
make
yeah.
that?
We still have, that's what we're sitting here now, still sort of, I know, unfortunately, that's the crux of
Well,
what's
why
going
would you,
on.
why would you
What
agree
does
to
it
Harrison?
matter if it's closed?
Don't
What hinges on that?
Well,
No, I'd like
think
to
it
understand.
would-
You know,
would
because Tom,
determine what
because
direction-
honestly, if a project this size, and with the money that can be made on his end because of it, I mean, he's gonna make far more money than we will. If the town, from all boards, is not dotting our i's, crossing our t's, you know, these fine legal points that their attorneys, our attorneys are gonna get involved with that we don't understand at all, can set us up for future lawsuits. So I'd rather wait and let the attorneys give us a final ruling so we can stand behind that and feel shielded and protected, rather than going off on our own and saying, well, Dineski never came back and said anything, and should have we
Well,
gone
but
to him
you
sooner?
why
weren't
did you-
asking Dineski, you were asking Larry.
but why you were allowing Brown to come in to make a presentation? You did do that. That
We
was-
asked Dineski if it was something, cause I remember Brown had suggested to us, and I forwarded it to Dan, and we said we felt it was best to ask David
Right.
if it was something, and then he emailed
didn't
back
see
and
those
said
What did he
yes.
say? He said yes.
He said yes, you can allow him to have the presentation at the select board.
Wow.
So as far as this stuff going, as you're saying, the process is continuing throughout this in the whole process. I know, just for example, if I were doing this, to present, I don't know how to word this in a better way than it's going to come out. But if I was going to have to make an ultimate presentation to whatever board for whatever, there's a lot of different considerations, specifically CONSCOM comment, DEP comment to a draft soil management plan or some similar sort of proposal that may have to get figured out before that final presentation can actually be made. So I'm not surprised. I'm just saying, you know, you can't. You got to keep the whole process going. I think. I'm not
I mean, I have to
advocating, I'm just-
disagree with you, Dan. I'm sorry. I just can't. That reading Dineski's letter, and knowing the fact that, and you've all agreed tonight that the thing was closed. It was pretty clear that this was in the jurisdiction of the planning board, and I'm sorry, I just,
And-
I don't understand why you wouldn't, why didn't you pick up the phone or call Vin or send an email saying, look, we haven't made a decision about that. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble getting by that.
Okay,
So-
well, I mean, that
Just so you
phone
know,
call
be
could've made
honest,
to me too.
I'm being honest with you.
No, that's what we're here
And
for.
okay, and that's when Michael and I talked, after that March 18th letter, I find it hard to believe you didn't just turn this over to the select board. And even the select board,
The plan.
Planning.
the planning board, this is not, you don't even have the capabilities or the zoning rules, and the facilities to handle a project like this. And if you put that on a, town administrator's shoulders, that's a huge, huge job and responsibility. So,
Look,
I have trouble with that.
Okay, I understand, fine.
Okay.
This was originally presented to us as, the DEP said, select board needs to decide whether or not, that was it, that was how it was presented. And I feel as though throughout this, however many months it's been, it's still not 100% that's not the case. I don't necessarily wanna have to deal with this project, that has nothing to do with it. But we've said it several times different ways, it never came clear to us that it was set in stone, we're still waiting to hear back on something, so, and it's not a stall, I can't continue to come up with, reasons why it wouldn't be in our, interest to push it on over that way. We just felt like there's a legal, process that's not finished.
Well, why do you think Anita was pushing Larry to make sure that, to give this to the jurisdiction?
You'll have
I'm
to
not
ask
gonna speak for
Anita.
Anita, I don't think any of us can speak for Anita.
Okay.
At
That's
all,
fair
that
enough.
wouldn't be fair to her,
That's fair enough,
nor
yeah,
is fair
that's
to
fair
us
enough.
to speak for Anita. We can only speak to what we are privy to and what we have knowledge of.
And one of the other big things that wrangles me, since I'm pretty much wrapping up here, but one of the big things is the town has never, none of the people in this town have ever been given a hearing on this. It's never been talked about. In a
Well,
public
I'm
hearing.
gonna disagree with that, Tom. I agree 100% the town needs to hear about this project if there was a proposal to go forward. So if the boards, planning board, select board, attorneys, everybody else agree that this is something we wanna entertain, then absolutely this town needs to be fully involved from top to bottom, side to side. This is not a decision that should be made by any single board, and nor do any of us probably want the responsibility to have this, a project of this magnitude on 5, 6, 7 people's shoulders. So there never really was a full proposal, like you said, we were waiting for that, the engineers were here, here's the stuff, the people are all together. The only thing we got was when Norman Brown came with his initial idea and talked about, here's my plot, here's what I wanna do. Anita did put out a thing saying, hey, here's an idea out here, any questions or comments, please call us. But I don't think this project, for any of us, was advanced to the point where it was ready for a public hearing or a public meeting or anything else like that.
His initial meeting, I remember him saying, he says he's throwing it out there, and if you guys say no, it's no. If the townspeople say no, we'll walk.
I'm
You
correct.
remember that?
I would agree with you on that.
Right.
I heard him
Except
say
he's
the
probably
same thing.
spent
So he said it to you guys
$40,000
too?
on engineering, and he sent a whole proposal to DEP for approval. If that is approved by DEP, it comes to the select board, which he wants to do, and you guys say, well, we're okay with that.
I think.
Those trucks are rolling.
I just wanna state though, at multiple meetings that I sat in with you guys, I said my point of view on this was, it's not my decision. Let's have hearings on it and work together at planning board, select board, and figure a procedure to proceed to present this to the town if it comes along.
But
And we've said that at our meeting in select board, when you guys have been there, that needs public hearings, so we don't wanna.
No,
Okay,
you
so
said-
that-
you
wait,
said
Tom, wait,
there's
Tom.
no need for a public
Right.
hearing,
She
and you
said
guys
no,
didn't
I
say
said no,
anything in
Tom,
contradiction.
I've never said there's never a need for a
No,
public hearing.
Anita said that,
She said the
and
word
no one
hearing
spoke up.
was, right.
Okay, well, let me say this, because I think this is the biggest bone of contention that I have. I believe every word you said. I don't believe anybody that would take the presumption that they would do such a thing without a public hearing. I mean, that's an enormous impact on not only us, but the entire town.
In Gardner.
What boggles my mind is that behind our back, a 341-page proposal is submitted to DEP. Now, if he's doing this and it's an independent act, what did he say? Did he make any representations to DEP that the town of Hubbardston knows about this and here's the Tom's right, that's a $40,000 piece of paper there.
None of us can answer that.
I understand.
I know, and
I
I'm,
mean, we're
I'm not
it's-
saying you, I
it's a
want an answer.
rhetorical
I'm
question.
saying to you that this blows my mind that this has gone that far without us knowing about it. It really upsets me. It really upsets me that we are made to look like such chumps, that we don't know that a 341-page report on our, I guess on our behalf, went to DEP that
Not on
it's
our
gonna,
behalf.
well, no,
Town.
but somebody went to DEP.
Right.
It's on Mr. Brown's behalf, not the
Well,
town's behalf.
perhaps, but there's got to be some type of introduction that here's what I'm doing for the town of Hubbardston. Nobody, and I would suspect that that may have happened. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But nevertheless, why? I mean, that is some type of audacity, in my opinion. And now we're sitting here. There's 7 of us here, 8 of us here. I'm sorry, that we're standing and go, wow, that happened? I feel like a fool. I really think that this is the indication of what we can come to expect, if in fact anything had ever come about this. This is just an assumption that blows my mind, that it would be gone to the DEP without any of us knowing.
Well,
And-
Not whether that one.
This one?
I mean, just to answer that, not answer.
I don't know if there's an answer,
to it.
Dan. You
No,
know,
that's
just
why
a
I said to
statement.
add to it.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer. But, documents like that, and what I do, and not necessarily for this sort of thing, are submitted to DEP for approval without final approvals all the time.
But have they done so without the knowledge of the, for instance, in this case, the host town? It's kind of like a setup, he's
Would
been
you-
stroking us for a little bit of time, and we've got all this coming in, and here it is, by the way, they'll approve this, don't worry, I got it set up. I got it under
And
control.
there's no requirement to have a public hearing.
And I think that's what Anita said, when you said there's a requirement for a public hearing. I think she said legally there is no requirement for a
Oh,
public
there
hearing.
is not
We
one.
didn't say there was a legal requirement.
Right, but
We said
we
there was a
all
moral
indicated
requirement.
that,
We wanted one.
we all said that,
I know, but there's
we don't
no,
wanna
there's
do
no
this.
requirement.
And again, things were getting a little chippy between us all around that time,
Yeah,
too. So I think some of that influenced me, I'm not speaking for Anita once again, but some of that, there was influenced conversations, I'm sure, as far as how things were stated or parsing words and that sort of thing. And, all that's unfortunate, and hopefully that's all gone
Yeah.
now. But I think that contributes sometimes to
Lucky,
tone.
lucky for Leanne, she wasn't involved in any of this, cause she had. She
He is now.
When
Yeah,
did
yeah.
when did you resign the select board position?
February.
Smart girl.
Well,
But some of this you weren't even aware of.
No, I
Correct.
wasn't.
Right. So, I mean, if you, and I hope, I don't know, did you make copies of all this stuff? But if you go through and read Anita's emails, she was pushing hard. She was pushing
Oh, it
hard.
looks that way.
Yeah, it really does. I understand you guys know nothing about this, and whether I haven't actually, you gotta get me the other, I'm having trouble downloading all of her emails. I get to buy a program to put it in there for $100, but.
the first,
But in the introduction, it doesn't mention anything about the town of Hubbardston.
Has approved
No, in fact, we're not even on the principles in the front, contact
Right.
information.
And you take this information that Brennan's just said, and I'm coming up, and understand that Mr. Brown has a contract with the town, 2004. He was said in his contract that he would reclaim this pit when he was done, and that no more than 4 acres of the pit would ever be open at one time. And for 12 years, he has just told the town he's not gonna do it. And as recently as January 3rd of this year, I said, if you're not giving approval of this, are you gonna do it? And he said, no, I'm not gonna do it. And these are his words. My-
We've heard that a number of times.
Yeah,
Yeah, of course not. No, we would never do it.
we would never do it. So I mean, what, and Vin's right, I mean, he's sending this stuff off, I mean, we don't know what's gonna, and again, we just got all this information, a couple of days ago.
So we've been, and sort of all over, but so you know, part of why I'm here tonight too, me personally, is, you know, that there are rumors out there right now that there are other reasons why some of us may be for or against, you know, this, and specifically, you know, this Facebook stuff. There's
Really? I've not seen anything.
oh,
about
there
this.
is. So
The town
and
Facebook site?
there's just rumors of even select board members who may have something to gain potentially, or some others. So, you know, that really bothers me as far as integrity wise. So, you know, that's the sort of thing that I just, you know, I don't know where they come from or how all that stuff is disseminated,
Yeah.
but I take that stuff really personally.
I don't blame you, Dan, and I'm shocked to hear that was unfair. My biggest, and I said in my letter to Mike, that no one in the town knows about this proposal.
I don't know, I've gotten 4 or 5 calls at home already. What's this sludge coming from Boston?
Well, that's because of the
The-
articles on town meeting warrant. That's what this is all about. That's what
Well-
you get. Maybe, Dan, you have to address the
But
the
that-
fact,
That article really doesn't address dirt from Boston, so it's, I mean, it doesn't specifically state Boston, it's certain types of dirt.
yeah, RS1.
So, it's out there somewhere, you know,
Well, it's in the meeting minutes from one of the meeting. Mark's letter, he submitted it to us, and it's in some of the
That's
meeting
true.
minutes for it, that the hazardous waste dump and all this stuff.
Heather and Josh's letter was in there as well, so I mean.
So-
And-
There's also people on Facebook saying that there's selectmen support turning Hubbardston into a dumping ground.
Which is just,
What site is that?
Interestingly enough, and I have no problems with anybody's opinions or discussions here tonight, but interestingly enough, and maybe this is where the situation comes from that we're all talking about, the audacity that Norman has. He stood up in that public hearing the other night, as did Rob, and said, we have offered the town $1 a yard, which is half of what we're getting paid for it, and that's what we're gonna do. And then Rob reinforced, I don't know if anybody was there, but that's what he said. We've offered the town $1 a yard.
Well,
So, in the public hearing, and there it is, so maybe the whole confusion comes from what's being said out there that perhaps is not even close to being true.
well, it's like any small town, one little thing just keeps
Well,
expanding.
Sure.
if you don't give the general public the best representation of the truth you can, if you just say, oh, we can't talk about it, it's, you know, behind the veil, and it goes on for months, the public will fill in what's missing.
Like the tax
They'll
collector.
make it up.
But the,
Like
yeah,
the tax collector.
right. Well, to be honest, I have talked to a lot of people about this in
I don't
town,
know about the tax.
and I tell them about the project. I mean, what I know about it, and what Norman Brown said, dirt comes from Boston. He said that. He said that several times. It's actually in there, in the Boston metro area. That stuff is coming here, and I've told a lot of people that. And I asked them, would you be in support of that? I have not met anyone yet that would be.
so I've also heard, because I'm in this business, you know, my company, we do this sort of work, but just to put it in scale, you know, over the last, I did a little research as I, you know, once again, was seething at the question of my own integrity of, you know, the last 15 years, maybe done $100 million worth of volume, maybe 0.5% of that total company-wise has gone to a facility such as this, an RCS1, maybe 0.3% of our total. So it's such an insignificant part of my own, so for anyone to think that that was a driving force for anything, from just my side of the select board seat that I sit in, also, you know, is totally
Where does
untrue.
most of the material go?
Landfills, hazardous waste landfills, that sort of thing. We just, yeah.
Lined hazardous
Lined
waste
hazardous waste
landfills.
landfills, yeah. But that's because
That's a
it's
good
not,
place for it.
what's that?
That's a good place for it.
Well, that's because it's not the material that's tested that falls, I don't wanna get into this, falls below the RCS one
I do.
criteria. But anyway, that just, that.
Well, to be fair to you, Dan, too, in every single meeting you ever spoke about it, you did say, I work in this industry, I know a lot about this stuff. So it's not like you.
Further, and one final thing, just because I am on the Board of Selectmen, I had already planned on and had discussed this with Rayanne about recusing myself from any vote that had to do with any sort of financial negotiation, if it ever came to that,
Right.
for this, just to make sure. Actually, the first meeting Laura Foley was at, if you recall, she said that, she goes, isn't that gonna be a conflict of interest? And we all kinda said, huh, I don't know. So, that would pull me.
It's the appearance of conflict.
That's all. That's it. So that was already in the works.
So anyway, so the I don't know where to go from here, but
I don't know.
all this stuff is out there. You can read all the notes. Anita was deeply involved in this. One of the other things the planning board has a real issue with, I know Vin has it, is not being allowed to talk to Nolan Brown. I mean to Dineski or town attorney about this stuff.
We resolved that, right? I mean, that was a miscommunication. Do you
Okay.
believe that was a miscommunication?
Right,
Well,
it wasn't not, it was no, contact had to go through the town administrator, it wasn't that.
It always had been.
No, there were some things that were not copied to the town administrator. So, I know that's true. And that was all it was about. It had nothing to do with restriction for any other reason but that, is that everything needed to be copied, just like we would have to do as well. So that was it.
Well, Dineski said to, I forget to Rand, you might know this, he said to you that and Mike, you said this to me the other night, that Dineski was saying the planning board is racking up a lot of bills, and, there's
You
no.
guys were going to, there was the time when there was a lot of direct contact with nothing to the town administrator to monitor.
No,
That it was,
there was one letter that went to Dineski without the town administrator being involved, and I sent it. And I corrected it within days.
the bigger concern I have with the attorneys, if you look, we went
Oh,
through
and
this
it
Tom.
didn't ask for action, it reported information.
But, go ahead, Mike.
When we went over the legal bills last night, a large chunk of the legal bills, at least till the end of March when you had the report, was actually Dineski and Norman Brown III, the attorney, directly talking. And each one of the times that they directly talk to each other,
To the
the
town,
bill goes up.
to $2,000.
The bill goes up, the bill goes up, the bill
Why,
goes up.
why do we do that as a town? Why do we have our town attorney consulting with the proponent?
That's totally customary. I mean,
It is customary, and Dineski, because I was asked of Dineski the night he was here for that letter, and Dineski agreed that is customary when there's two parties, with two attorneys that they talk. However, it was a lot of legal bills that kept going up and up and up and up with what aim is my question.
We had an instance where a proponent of a position was asking, before the planning board, was asking the town attorney a lot of questions about his position and submitting information to the town attorney. And the town attorney said essentially, get yourself a lawyer. Doneski, to the proponent of the person who was trying to interpret the driveway as a road.
Oh, the A&R, no, that wasn't Dineski, that was Joel
All
Bart.
right, well, Joel said, get
A&R.
yourself a lawyer. Don't use me as your lawyer.
Right, but they weren't, the other person wasn't a lawyer, so I think it's.
Well, what I'm trying to say is it's not customary. The proponent has an obligation to state his position, make his position as well founded as he can, and present it. He doesn't get to negotiate with the town attorney.
Well, unless you are in negotiations.
Well, were you?
No, and that's the concern.
That's the point.
Right, so that's the concern.
He
is
was
that-
teeing it up with the
Right.
town attorney, which is
So, I mean,
inappropriate.
certainly, like when we did the church deal, this was 5-6 years ago, there was a lot of lawyer-to-lawyer negotiations back and forth that didn't involve the select board.
With consent.
With consent.
With consent.
Yeah.
But
So-
I don't think we had any idea that what was going on was that there was behind the scenes
Well-
thousands of dollars of
but
attorney to
you
attorney.
blamed the racked up bills, not blamed, but you attributed the racked up bills to planning board involvement.
Right, but again,
And
like I said,
I don't think that's
we
accurate.
cleared up the miscommunication.
That's a
Look, you
miscommunication.
guys,
Miscommunication.
Vin's letter was pretty clear about your feeling on that. Okay,
So we fixed that.
we tried to fix that, and we'd like to move past that.
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
are, we're.
I know.
we're
I'm just saying we're all talking here, but
Tom hasn't moved past it,
No,
but we
well,
fixed it.
No, I have
Sure.
moved past it, and I admitted that I was the guy who wrote the letter to
Right,
Nestle
so-
and failed to contact Anita.
There was a
and I corrected it within
miscommunication, and
days.
that's all fixed.
You okay with that, man?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, okay.
I don't have an issue. I think that, you know, as far as I'm concerned, in fact, I talked with Rand just a couple weeks ago before I called Mr. Dineski about the hearings that I was gonna conduct last week because of initiative petitions. I had a couple questions. That all worked out. And quite frankly, as I said in my letter, 15 years I've been on this board, I've never contacted any one of those attorneys without at least letting the administrator know, I'm calling about this and this and this, so, you know, and it's more because of the issue of reporting and accounting for fees. You know, you're gonna find that coming out sooner or later, that I called Joel and we talked about this, and if we don't have the money to do it, or it's not a prudent thing to do, we generally don't do it, or I don't do it anyway. And that's how that's worked, and I think that's worked fine, because, you know, if we can't communicate through the town administrator, who never, prior to the charter, had that responsibility, it was just more of a courtesy than anything else, because Board of Selectmen rule the whole thing. There's gotta be accountability. I mean, you know, it's one of those interesting situations in life. We all sit there, and when the plumber comes and is charging us $150 an hour, we sit there and we watch him. And when the lawyer's bill comes, we were never in his office, but we get the bill and we don't know what he worked on, but we paid a bill anyway. And so, you know, I'm very aware of this accountability, and I think Copeland and Page is wonderful with this. This is not an issue at all, but it is a good way to proceed, so that everybody makes sure that they know what's going on, and we don't have this question of, oh, you racked up that bill.
And you know,
Didn't work.
I think a good way to proceed is just recognize that this really is not a pissing match between the planning board and select board. We're all on the same team. You know, clearly there was things that you guys knew that we didn't know, and you know, like we said last night, Tom, well, actually you said last night, Tom, you guys were in one room, we were in another room, and in between was dark, and there was a town administrator kind of swirling around in the middle, it sounds like, with Norman Brown and some other things going on, that none of us really had the same information. And I think that's why a lot of times when you would present stuff to us or come to us kind of hot and bothered, we were
Wouldn't know
We're
what-
still waiting for proposals, that's all we said.
we
We're
had
just
no
waiting
idea what
for
you were talking
proposals.
about. We had no idea what you were talking about. We couldn't figure out why the planning board is so heated about this, because we haven't heard anything about this, like what's going on.
Would
So
you understand, do you understand now?
I get it, I get it,
But
so.
it's not just
Yeah.
communications. It's what's best for the town. Do we really want
But we're not there yet,
a
Tom.
million?
We're not there yet.
Well, I am, cause I've read that document.
But take that document, until you just went through all this stuff, you didn't know that was there either.
What wasn't?
You didn't know that the proposal to the DEP was there until just recently.
No, we
No,
knew
I-
that.
I
We
knew that
in April.
in
We
March.
gave you a copy of it
April.
in
On April 7th, April 4th, I gave you a copy of it.
That,
That,
Which-
That's that.
Is that just the first 4 pages?
Well, it's the first 8 or so, but.
Yeah.
8 of 300.
but I guess the
So-
point is, prior to you seeing it in the first place, I guess, back in the tape.
But
or
what
whatever.
I'm saying is, I think the discussion we're having is not the merits of the program.
No, we haven't got there yet.
We haven't gotten there yet,
Yeah.
and that's not for tonight. And
Oh, I think it should be a little.
Well, Tom, I wanna
Not
contend,
yet.
and I'm not gonna
Not yet.
presuppose anything for you, but in my opinion, my potential opinion, I don't know that
Your opinion has to be informed.
Well, no, I don't know how much in that document, if that document existed in the first place on Earth, that you'd like it. So I don't know that it's so much what the content necessarily is for this sort of a proposal.
Well, I can honestly say the Gardner Conservation Commission looked at it, and they're pretty excited about it,
Yeah.
yeah.
so
you
again,
understand.
I don't think tonight's thing should be about debating the merits of the program.
Yep.
I agree.
Or debating the merits of the soils and all that kind of stuff, because that's 3 steps of where we need to be and come together right now, of what's going on. And, you know, we get bogged down and we like this guy, we don't like the guy, we like the proposal, and
Yeah,
then we're
whatever,
gonna fly
yeah.
off the rail again.
But I think to conclude this part of it, I think we kinda you understand where we're coming from now. And we kinda, I personally believe that you didn't know a lot, and I can pretty much verify most of the stuff that happened in February, March, and part of April, until Rayanne came on board. I don't think you guys knew about it, and I think Rayanne worked on this. She was and as a former selectman too, she was kinda surprised, to say the least.
And that doesn't infer there's anything sinister going on.
No, I absolutely don't think,
I
and I
understand.
honestly say, I have tremendous respect for Anita, and if she was doing anything in here, it was only to benefit the town, okay, and she was working in the dark, and quite honestly, the charter allows her to do that, okay? The charter does allow her to do it, I was never a fan of the charter, but it does, from what I read of it, she does have tremendous authority, and she could do that. So, I'm not saying she did anything wrong, the only thing communication is the key to running any government body. It's open communication, open town government is the key to any, in my
Right,
opinion.
and I agree, I think certainly a 3 or 4 month kind of dark period for us when we weren't involved or informed of what was going on behind the scenes. I mean, really from the end of 2015 until middle of March, there was no issue, there was no discussion, there was no anything.
I really didn't think anything much was
Was
going
happening
on.
at all.
Good, and we
since
kept coming
that-
in and saying to you, what the hell's going on?
No,
What the hell,
that-
we
and
knew,
that's-
we knew what was we knew what was going on, quite honestly.
That's why I started attending your meetings, because of what Tom said with the public hearing he had with the abutters, no one was there. So I figured it would be best if one of us at least, if Norman Brown's there, at least we know what's going on.
Okay, so can we move on to where we're going?
I just
Or do you
have
wanna-
before we go on with this, I just
Okay.
have a couple of things I wanna point out. Maybe you have the answers, I don't know, because this is the, General Legal Services. It's dated April 26th, and it goes back to 10/27/15. Well, that was redacted, but 10/22.
What is this, the bill from the lawyer?
This is from Copeland and Page, I'm sorry.
The
Correct.
billing?
Yes.
Oh.
And on 10/22/15, David Dineski, $87.50, Pitcherville Road property. Review draft notice to owner to cease and desist earth removal activities. Review earth removal bylaw, draft revisions to letter and forward to town administrator. So there's the cease and desist letters that we had there,
How
okay?
much was that, 2 minutes of work for $87?
There's a minimum.
Point, well,
Sure.
They're gonna
50
charge
minutes,
400
50
and
50
something.
minutes,
Oh,
right?
50 minutes, alright.
It's cheap.
So then we go to October the 16th. BWR, I don't know who that would have been. Somebody else down at Copeland. Legal analysis, reference conflict of interest issues, agent for planning board.
Bill Murray,
Okay,
my guess. I don't know.
perhaps. I
Doesn't
mean,
sound like it.
that's my suspicion, but we don't know anything. I certainly don't know anything about why Bill would be calling him about a conflict of interest. Okay, so then it goes on. JBB,
Would
I
that be for
should,
the building committee?
Yeah, but that's back in October.
What'd you say? What dates?
10/16. Legal analysis reference conflict of interest issues, agent for planning board.
I remember reading a letter by Bill where he declared his, having performed past duties or worked with some party that was involved in something in town, but it wasn't for us.
Well, this
Our
is,
first meeting in building committee was in the beginning of November, so that could have been that.
Maybe.
so then 10/14, analyze question reference, member of capital committee providing personal services to planning board. Who would that be?
Bill,
Bill?
Yeah.
JBB on 10/13, brief telephone conference with chairman, oh, that's bylaw, that's another one, sorry. That was the solar bylaw. Well, those are the two ones that I saw, and I said, we had no business with our agent, if it is Bill Murray, we gave him no information for him to be going for a conflict of interest. I don't know if he was working on our behalf or not. There was nothing there in October. And also the capital committee, is he on the capital committee
He
as
is on
well?
the capital committee.
Yeah. So, the personal services of him to the planning board. Well, he doesn't provide any personal services, it's all by, on demand for us. So, those are two kind of interesting things I don't quite understand.
I don't know. One
I
does
don't
sound
know.
like the building committee, though. He was the chair of it until he just had to give up that
Uh-huh.
due to a conflict of
So,
interest.
what would his conflict of interest be, is I guess, that's what I'm curious about, is
Well, because
because,
at least on the building committee, what, he just resigned from it because the architect that was hired to do the building, actually, he has a job with, so he
Okay.
had to resign.
Hired him to do another project, so he couldn't be the architect's boss and being the chair of the building committee and have the architect be his boss as a
sure,
consultant.
that's understandable,
Correct,
but,
so-
but, you know, agent for the planning board, and
I don't-
clearly
I don't
it's in reference to the Brown proposal. I mean, that's
I
the
don't
only
know if
thing you would be calling
maybe
about.
he did, we'd have to ask Bill, I mean, obviously, we're all speculating, could he have done work? stuff
Well,
for-
I just, I find that kind of stuff is the stuff that brings up all of these again, all of these questions that we all have about what the hell, why, and what's going on that we don't really know about.
Alright, well,
And I just,
we're getting most of our answers here.
Okay,
Alright.
does anyone have anything before we
I
kind
just
of
have
move
one
on?
comment. I've rarely spoken with Mr. Dineski, but I've never spoken to him where he didn't tell me that he had already been discussing that topic with Brown's lawyer. I mean, it was always.
well,
he
that's
was
pretty
always-
clear with the amount of money he
Yeah,
built us
he
to.
just-
So,
it was
so the
always-
question, I mean, we certainly can't debate this, we're not an open meeting for us tonight, but the question I think we have to discuss next week is, do we put a stop to that? You know, do we direct Dineski and the attorneys that they are not to be, unless we go into full-fledged negotiations at some time, which I find unlikely, you know, they're not to be discussing things with one another.
I would at least
I
go
think I'd
through it again.
recommend
And at that, I think within that direction, there would have to be some indication of, due to the fact that we've concluded this, like, it's in the purview of the planning board, or the site is closed. I think there's gonna be a little bit more to it than just that. I think
Well, where are you guys upon that? I mean, and Mike asked me that.
we can't really debate that.
I know you can't, I'm just saying,
My personal only part of this anymore,
Yeah.
myself on the select board.
I can certainly add it to the 13th agenda.
yeah,
for a quick
I mean,
discussion.
I would like to see, from my point of view, and this is only in my personal, what I want, the minimum that I want anyway, is I think the select board should give this whole project to the planning board, and they should contact Norman Brown and say, any dealings with this project from now on needs to go through the planning board, and then you should contact DEP saying that the planning board is the authority that's gonna be handling this for the town.
Okay, so I think we'll do what you just said there. We'll put it on it.
You can plan
If we,
that
if we
put it on
don't do
agenda.
something, this divide and conquer is gonna prevail.
Can we just do one thing where, I know that it's under the purview of the planning board if that's what the board of selectmen agrees on the 13th. However, can you still keep us informed?
We,
So that,
you get my letters all the time.
I understand, but I just don't want anyone to be like shocked, but it's
Well, we're on the
happening this
we're on the
evening.
magic too.
You know,
You can't imagine how our ratings are going up.
You guys still beat us. But I can't imagine why we wouldn't do that. I don't think we would never do that anyways. I mean, but in light of everything else that's happened.
Could I understand what the 13th agenda item is? Because I have a conflict and I have to decide whether to go or not. Is that, what
I
are we
was
doing
just
on the 13th?
throwing out there if the board wanted to,
The 13th agenda item would be something in the lines of, again, nothing specific because we can't do that tonight.
Well, let me
But
say.
it would be, something in the lines of, in the pit is most likely closed and, based on Dineski's letter, that this would be in the purview of the planning.
I don't agree with that. Mr. Brown
You-
himself
You just said that the pit was closed.
says that over the 19, this is the document, 310-page document, over the 19 years Pitcherville operated, approximately 2.5 million yards of material were removed from the Hubbardston location. During peak operations, there were 150 truckloads a day.
Oh, I'm sorry, I mean the pit is most likely not closed. I missed.
You meant
Yeah.
not close.
I missed.
Because that's what he says, the site is
Yes.
partially closed by New England Organics.
So it would,
The word really is reclaiming.
So the
It's been
motion would
partially
be
reclaimed.
something in the lines of, you know, the pit is not closed and therefore this project is in the further purview of the planning board.
Right. And that needs to be sent to the TEP, cause they're waiting they will be asking for the opinion of the town. And it doesn't have to be, the consent order doesn't say
Well-
selectmen, it says the
Permitting
permitting authority.
I'm not opposed to, as a planning board, we do all our planning board things. And then we go to the select board and say, here's our report. We don't have to act unilaterally, we could act with the
Well, it is, we do
concurrence.
have to, if they put it, if, it is our responsibility and we would have to vote on it.
Okay.
But I would say to everyone on our board, we really shouldn't vote on it until we have another meeting similar to this.
Well,
We have to have a hearing.
technically, okay, the way it would work is if the planning board hypothetically approved the plan, it would send the report to the select board, giving them the confidence to go ahead and negotiate on behalf of the town, cause you're the ones that have to do that. We can't do that, but we would not do that without the imprimatur from the planning board, in other words. I mean, that's the way it would work, that would be the logical.
And if the opposite case exists?
In the opposite case, obviously, if it was not approved under the jurisdiction of the planning board, then you would not even get the okay to go ahead and do it. Without that okay, you can't negotiate it. So that's pretty clear under the general bylaws of the town as well. Because the general bylaws state that you have ultimate authority unless, in the case of the bylaws, you're not giving it. And this is the only place that I found that the select board does not have complete authority.
Do you mean
It's-
bylaws or do you mean the 19?
I mean, the general bylaws is clear, the select board has the authority unless it is expressly not giving or taken away.
Yep.
And,
So you're talking about 19?
right,
So
19 gives that, takes it from you guys, gives it to us, 'cause that's what happened.
So we would write the regulations and everything else, but you would negotiate the terms of how much you would
Cost
pay.
and
Yeah, they would sign the consent agreements. We
have
can't do
no
that.
desire to talk about the regulations and would want them to have the responsibility.
No, we were just, while you were away, we were just clarifying how the process would work, you know,
Yeah,
because
they
we
would
can't.
clarify the regulations, we would just negotiate financial.
Right,
terms.
we, just like the solar, you know, we don't negotiate the
Finance.
Pilot.
finance, the
Yeah.
finance agreements, but you can't do it without our consent, so, I mean, it's just the checks and balances, that's basically.
I think it's a good system.
I have one other comment. Dan, you made a comment about me before. You said you're not sure I would like this proposal. No matter what it said, basically what I think you said.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to, again, as
I'd just like
sort
to
of
point out,
be careful with
I'd
my-
just like to point out that if I have an opinion on it, I'm the only one in this room that's read it. So if you're accusing me of having formed an informed opinion, then I'll take that accusation.
Sounds
But
good.
don't accuse me of having an opinion prior to reading it.
Okay,
Got it.
I'll be glad to put this to bed. Get some sleep.
I haven't had this much fun in days.
The
No,
pay,
I mean, I think
we're
we're-
racking up the overtime.
I think you understand what, I think it's been a good meeting. Mike and I had a good talk last night. I think it's been good to kind of clear the air and kind of move forward.
I think there's one more step. No, I'm serious.
We know that.
I'm not sure we really know each other. And I think we need to. Pardon me?
You want the drinks at the Yellow?
I would love to go get a beer.
I should have brought my wine.
I've spent my whole life doing large projects, mechanical engineer, air pollution control projects, water pollution control projects, for large corporations, international. And, I've got 40 years invested in that, and I'm retired now. But that's my background, just like you have a background. Spent, developed and applied technologies from R&D right through to commercial application, removing parts per billion of mercury in flue gas from coal-fired power plants and stuff. I mean, the world really spends a lot of money to bring pollutants from gaseous to liquid to solid. And when you get it in the solid phase, you can actually control it. You know, more so than you can in the liquid phase or the gaseous phase. You wouldn't believe how much money is spent controlling pollution. And so that's my background, and that's what I'm interested in doing in this town. Not allowing pollution to, there's an old joke, the solution to pollution is dilution. And you just keep getting it down to smaller parts per millions, and all of a sudden it's okay.
That's why the Boston Harbor was created in a bad way.
Hmm.
Just dilute it, not dilute it,
Yeah,
dilute it. Oh,
throw it in.
whoops. Can't
Do you know
dilute
how
it.
they-
So,
You
that's
know-
my background.
Right.
but-
You know how some of these soils, you probably know this, some of these soils, they take 100 yards of really, really bad crap, really bad dirt, and then and this was told to us by the Conservation Commission in Gardner, and they take 100 yards of really clean dirt, and they mix it together. So you can't put the dirt, bad dirt there 100 yards. But if you mix it with this 100 yards of really good dirt, and now mix it together, then test it, then that's okay. But in the volume that we're talking here, 12, 15, 16 million, and if the parts per million are 5% or whatever, you have 1,000,000 tons of bad stuff in there. And that is the crux of, I think, the problem. That's why I don't like it.
No, but we're doing introductions, we're not arguing the case.
Okay, but anyways, I'm just
This
saying.
gentleman spent 30 years in his own business, or maybe 40 years.
No, 30 years in my own business, and I was very, very successful in a roofing construction business. Was able to retire at 55, and I attribute it mostly to I like to read documents.
You gotta read specifications and meet the spec.
I mean, you gotta write. You're in this business, Dan. You know that it's the devil, the details in the devil's in the details. And
Mhm.
I worked terribly hard. I was the guy that would always go to the project meetings who actually read the whole specification.
Me too.
So and that's how you make money. So
And Vin, of course, is,
Yeah.
teaching education background, but also real estate, which I think,
Well-
is a knowledge base that's important in the planning board.
Perspective-wise, it is. I've been a real estate broker for 33 years. Educated for 21, now retired. But more importantly, I just really like public service. One of these days, I don't even want to get paid.
How long you been doing this?
Oh, I did 7 years on the school committee, 11 years as tax assessor, and 15 years as a planning board. And it's interesting, it's fun, and it's never been more fulfilling than it has been with this particular board because of the activity level that everybody on this board has. It's very, very satisfying. I enjoy it, that's all. And it's, there's nothing else.
And we've got an avid outdoorsman, who of course is, I think, safety conscious. Well, you tell me.
I spent 30 years in the computer industry and as well as the firearms industry. And safety is, when you're playing with electricity and firearms, safety is number one. And health, my kids, my grandchildren, I want to make sure that all of us from 90 years old to 1 month old is safe with what we're drinking and bringing into our town.
So I think it's important that you know our backgrounds a little bit. You know, we have to get to know each other, or we're not going to trust each other, and we're not going to work well together. So,
You wanna know ours?
yes, please. That's what I was just going to ask you to do.
Pat?
I'm self-employed in the construction business. Grew up in town, still here, with 3 kids, and been self-employed for pretty much my whole career, so.
I can attest for him. I knew him in kindergarten.
Right in this building.
Really, in this building.
That's pretty much it.
As previously stated before, but I got a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering from Tufts a long time ago now, and I've been, for the last 19-20 years, been doing this, 2 different companies, and my degree was in water resource engineering and site remediation design to handle contaminated soil and groundwater, and never went straight to the design piece of things because my mom and dad's neighbor, 4 months after I graduated, was living in Porter Square in Somerville. Hair was fairly long. Went home to visit my parents, and the next door neighbor friend from high school owned a construction company in Oxford, which was 10 minutes away. And they called me in for an interview, and I went, and they offered me $12 an hour, and I was like, wow! And so it was the construction field, so not engineering, straight up construction field, and made my last couple of weeks at the restaurant, and been doing this ever since, just various different roles.
What is this? that
This
you do?
is project management, right now Vice President, project management of heavy civil and environmental work. So dam repairs, clean construction, some concrete and whatnot, but that's about 50% of our work. The other 50% is site cleanups, hazardous waste remediation, brownfields redevelopments, that sort of stuff. So that has every implementation that you can imagine, from a capping to a source removal to groundwater injection treatments to groundwater removal and treatment. So any sort of application probably has run across what I've done over the last 20 years.
So I got my my medical degree from Loyola University Chicago, Stritch School of Medicine, and currently I'm a cardiologist. I'm a general cardiologist because I kind of do a little bit of everything, but my specialty is imaging and imaging physics. but I'll do a little bit of anything you need with the ticker.
If you'll pay for it.
If you pay for it, right.
No, just lay out here and help us out.
We'll take it without, you
That's
know.
why Vin wants you at all his meetings.
You got some tools in your trunk or something?
No, unfortunately, no, just a couple screwdrivers. But 3 kids, 2 of them are in the schools, one's too young for it, but she'll be here soon enough in kindergarten, and, you know, been on the board for 6 years, and I think it was at least a year, maybe 2 on FinCom prior to.
Rayanne,
Oh, you want me to go too?
please.
Up until taking this job, I was an auditor for 14 years. I got a business administration accounting degree at Manatee Community College in Florida. International studies with a political science major, from University of South Florida.
You auditing private business or municipality or what?
All private business, insurance, research companies, various other. I worked at Suffolk Downs as an accountant.
Cool. Shady.
Yes, that's why I left.
Oh, wait a minute, I spent a great deal of time at Suffolk
To
Downs.
say
I don't-
nothing of the money.
I'm not sure how shady Suffolk is.
How much money did you spend there?
Well, I forgot to say time and money, I suppose. Bought a lot of horses at Suffolk Downs, or paid for a lot of horses.
My conflict on the 13th is interesting. The Office of the Attorney General, Maura Healey, hosting a listening session. And she sent the scouts out to various locations and drinking water quality, asthma, lead paint, toxic chemicals in the environment, energy costs. You know, she sprinkled it with some potential topics.
Yep.
I'm gonna go down and talk to her, I hope. All are invited.
So I'll invite the rest of the committees. I can give you I probably will just send this whole pile around to everyone. They can gauge through it. Rayanne's gonna give me the rest of the documents.
I hate to interrupt. I gotta go get the girls in gymnastics.
Yep, I'm
So
good.
thank
We're
you.
good. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming in.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much.
All right.
Just she asked what time it was.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
look at
Yes. Well,
We're gonna
Tom,
try to get it
this
going.
your page goes back. in
Yeah,
the-
I think it's his.
That's mine.
Oh, sorry, Tom.
I've gotta go through these and put these in chronological order.
You need this little caddy thing.
We don't have a motion yet.
I know
well,
that.
it's been an interesting exercise, that's for sure. I guess we've said all we're gonna say. I don't think we need to summarize it at all. I think it's fine. I'm thrilled Tom put this together, and it was a great idea.
Does anyone wanna, I'll give you, well, I need to put these in order and I'll put them in a binder
Yeah.
so you can go through them. It's kinda interesting.
For posterity, Tom, we all need copies,
Well,
but,
my poor printer.
I don't wanna set a copy.
but, I do really appreciate you guys coming in, Rayanne, yourself, and Mike,
Motion to adjourn?
and if anything else,
I'm gonna go, Dominique.
Thanks
Oh,
for
wait,
trying, Tom.
if anything else, if this doesn't encourage us all to be diligent about what we're doing here and who we're doing it with, I don't know what will, but let's just proceed and we'll go from there. And, if you're not doing anything tomorrow night, why don't you guys come to the town meeting where we're gonna have a lot more fun tomorrow night.
That'll be interesting.
And, is there a motion to adjourn? Is that what I heard?
That was a
Is there
motion.
second?
I wrote it down.
All in favor?
Second.
Opposed? So
Yep.
voted. Good night, folks.
Thank you.
Good night, thanks.
This was recording, so I just needed to unplug them.
Yeah, we got accused of something like that before, didn't we? We were just.
Squeeze the electrons out.
I don't know how to get the plugs
I
off.
think you gotta squeeze this.
You push it to front.
Thanks for coming in, Mike.
Thanks, Tom.
Dr. Mike.
Yeah.